Call to order and public notice. This is a regular meeting of the Land Use Board of the Township of Greenwich. Adequate notice of this meeting has been given in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, and in the notice was published in the Express Times and Star Ledger newspapers. The notice was posted on the municipal bulletin board in the Township Administration Building in Greenwich Township, New Jersey, and notice was filed with the Township Clerk.
All right, roll call.
Mr. Beam,
Here.
Mr. Scuderi,
Here.
Mr. Baylor,
Here.
Ms. Cullen, excused, Mr. Hill,
Here.
Mr. Fiamma,
Here.
Mr. Blunt,
Here.
Ms. Sherlaw. Here. Mr. Bradlaugh,
Here.
Ms. Parker,
Here.
Mr. Graham,
Here.
Mr. Chicello.
Hey, hold it.
Here.
So, did you call Mr. Baylor?
Yes,
Okay, and we have a new board member tonight. Can you,
Colter John.
okay? And I swore him in before the meeting. And so now we're back up to full strength. And so could you call him?
Mr. Coulter John.
Here. All right, please rise for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
Do the voice.
liberty and justice for all. Sort of business approval of the minutes from February 13th. I do have one correction, members present, Mr. Bradlaw's name was, left out. Mr. Bradlaw was here in attendance. I'll be adding that to the minutes. Anybody got any other comments on the minutes from the February meeting? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes. Make a motion. Second. Roll call.
Who seconded?
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Mr. Scuderi,
Yes.
Mr. Beam,
Yes.
Mr. Chichillo,
Yes,
Mr. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Fiamma,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Blunt,
Yes.
Ms. Sherlaw. Yes. Mr. Bradlaugh,
Yes.
Ms. Parker,
Yes.
Mr. Graham.
Yes. All right, next order of business, adoption of resolutions, resolution 2025-01, application 2025-01, Michael and Sarah Torres, block 18, lot 23.18. Resolution memorializing the granting of a C variance to allow the construction for a pool and patio within the rear setback area in the planned development zone. Any board members have any comments?
This is draft 3 dated March 9.
Any comments on the resolution? Seeing none, I'll make a motion to adopt the resolution.
Second. Who seconded it?
Paul. Roll call.
Mr. Scuderi.
Yes.
Mr. Beam,
Yes.
Mr. Chichillo,
yes,
Mr. Baylor,
Yes.
Mr. Fiamma,
Yes.
Mr. Hill,
Yes.
Mr. Blunt,
Stay.
The only eligible voters are 7: Baylor, Beam, Ticello, Cullen, who's absent, Fiamma, Hill, and Scudera. So you called everybody.
okay.
All right, public hearing. Land use board number 2024-04. Applicant is the Tinsley Greenwich Township NJ LLC. Block 31, lot 12, 717 Route 173. Application is for preliminary and final site plan and C variances.
Thank you very much. This microphone doesn't work?
Correct. Doesn't work.
Okay,
The two above you do.
Right,
then I will lean forward and speak.
right. Keep your voice up.
You got it. Good evening, everybody. My name is Michael LaParry. I'm a partner with Mandelbaum Barrett. I'm counsel to the applicant, the Tinsley Greenwich Township, New Jersey LLC. We're here this evening seeking preliminary and final site plan approval, as well as bulk variance approval to develop the 43-acre property that is located at 717 Route 173, identified as block 31, lot 12 in the township's research and office manufacturing zone. The site is currently vacant except for an existing residential building that we have on our plan to remain as an accessory building. Our professionals are here to discuss the details of the project in much greater detail, but I will give a brief overview of what we're proposing. The applicant is proposing 185,000 square foot light industrial building with associated parking and infrastructure to support the proposed development. As you all likely know, the township recently revised the ROM zoning ordinance to restrict the uses that are permitted in the zone and on this site. So the board this board, I'm sorry, also reviewed those changes prior to their implementation. And both the town and this board have determined that a light industrial use is the most appropriate for this site. The stated purpose of the ROM zone is, and this is pursuant to the ordinance that enacts the zone, is that it is to encourage high quality development in the zone, and that's what we're here to propose tonight. Now, for the benefit of the public that's here tonight and for the board, the ordinance defines light industrial use as, and I'm gonna paraphrase it.
This for the record, let's get the ordinance section.
It's section 16-18A. And this is, the definition section is 16-18.3. And that it states that light industrial is defined as the making of goods, joining and shearing, forming goods that are intended to be sold to customers upon completion. And it also states that light manufacturing does not include such activities or materials that will present a major hazard from fire, explosion, or produce toxic or corrosive fumes, gas, smoke, odors, obnoxious dust or vapor, offensive noise or vibration, glare, flashes, or objectionable effluent. Now, the applicant is well aware of the zoning and the recent changes, and they understand that warehouse, major distribution, large fulfillment distribution centers, last mile fulfillment centers, and flex space uses are not permitted at the site. That's not what we're here for. That's not what's being proposed as part of this application. I state that just in case there's any confusion as to what we're proposing. I see a lot of people are interested in this application. Obviously, tonight there's a lot of turnout. But I want to be very clear about what we're seeking tonight. We are seeking to develop a permitted use, and the board is required to review the general site plan and bulk variance considerations. For the benefit of the public, our application and our presentation will be focused on site plan and site development features in accordance with municipal land use law site plan review criteria. What we're not here to discuss as part of this application is the minutia of the particular use. We do not have an end user at this particular time for the building. As I'm sure everybody knows, when you're approving development, something of this size and this nature is many years away from actual occupancy by a tenant. No tenant actually signs up and enters into a lease with a property years before it's actually built or even before it's approved before a land use board. So what we're doing is we're seeking application for a particular building that meets the use criteria in the ROM zone. It is axiomatic that the planning board does not have the discretion to deny a site plan based upon a use that's permitted by the ordinance. Rather, it may impose reasonable conditions to any approval that it may grant. And we're hopeful that we do get an approval, and we would accept certain reasonable conditions to alleviate or dispel any concerns that this board or the public may have.
Hold on 1 minute, please. You gotta speak louder. They're not picking you up next door well enough.
Okay,
So just for the record, so we have the usual hearing room here, which has a fire code limit of 80 people, and we're either at 79 or 80 right now. So we have an overflow room in the firehouse garage that can fit over 100. So I don't know how many people are in there right now. I went in before, there's a closed circuit TV, and they can see and hear. So we have to keep our voices up to make sure that they can hear, because at the appropriate time, after the applicant's attorney calls his first witness, and after that witness testifies, the chairman has told me before that we're first going to ask, we're going to find out if there are any attorneys in the audience representing parties, and the attorneys are going to have the first opportunity to ask witnesses questions, cross-examine them. And then he's going to open it up to members of the public. Members of the public for questions will be limited to 3 minutes each. There's so many members of the public. We don't want this to take a year. And then at the very end, even though the board normally asks questions first, the chairman has decided, and I think it's a very good idea, the board will ask questions of the witnesses last, because hopefully between the attorneys and the members of the public, they'll ask all your questions. If they don't, obviously, you'll ask questions. The reason I say all this is because once people in here are done asking questions, there might be people in the garage that want to ask questions. Then we're gonna ask people, okay, switch. You guys go in there and let the people from the garage come in here to ask their questions. But the point is, everyone has to keep their voices up.
I will continue to keep my voice or try to keep my voice up. Would it help if I move forward or to the
Yes,
side?
move forward, because these ceiling mics will pick you up. So let's move the podium up even closer.
I'm being
Careful of the
recorded.
wires.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm being
right there.
recorded. There's a lot of pressure on me picking up something this heavy. Okay. So
And just because you're in front of the board, don't lower your voice.
I will not lower my voice, okay? I will speak as loudly as I comfortably could. So again, we are here, to present a site plan application for a permitted building with no end user at this current time, but with the anticipation that we will fully comply with the use of the light industrial ROM zone. And I want to be clear up front that we will agree to a condition of any approval that once the site is ready for our light industrial user to take occupancy to the building, that we will come back before this board and we will invite all the public back to meet the proposed tenant, to learn about their operations, to learn about the type of products that they intend to manufacture or assemble on site, to learn about the hours of operation, the amount of vehicles it anticipates to use the site on a daily basis, and also any community outreach efforts that that employer might employ, employment opportunities that might be available for the public, and all the other details that would typically concern the neighbors. I'm stating that because I understand that people are gonna ask some questions, but again, I don't know that we are able to answer all of them, and I don't know if that's appropriate to answer questions about that level of detail at this point in time, which is why the applicant has agreed that we would come back and discuss all of those details with any proposed tenant that looks to occupy the space.
I gotta think about this.
You can
Okay.
think about that.
Yeah, because just for the record, there are right now, actually, let me find out. I know that there are two attorneys in the audience. I know that we have Ted Carroll, who represents the borough of Bloomsbury. So, Mr. Carroll, to stand up and say hello to everybody. Okay, and then we also have John Kaplan, who represents the Skylands Preservation Alliance. Can you raise your hand? Are there any other attorneys besides? Also, we don't go for clapping, whooping, making any noise or anything during the hearing, okay? But just listen, be respectful. Any other attorneys in the audience representing any parties, not themselves? Okay, none. So an issue has been raised by the borough of Bloomsbury, and they say by looking at the plans, it's their position that the use is not light manufacturing and would require a use variance. Now, I've spoken with the attorney in Bloomsbury and I've spoken with the applicant's attorney, and all three attorneys have agreed this is not something that can be decided up front. The board has to hear the testimony. So the only thing that I have to think about is if there are questions on what type of users, what they're gonna do to differentiate between, to make sure they're light manufacturing and not any of the prohibited uses. I don't think that can wait until after. That's gonna have to be part of, the applicant's case. And then the other attorneys or any other objectors have a right to put in their own evidence, because the board's gonna ultimately have to make a decision that, yes, this is a permitted use, because if it's not, this board would have to reconfigure itself. You'd have to redo the notices and start from scratch, because this is a joint land use board. It's a planning board that also has the power of a board of adjustment. But if a use variance is involved, the class 1 and class 3 members of the board, which is the mayor and the mayor or the mayor's designee, is class 1, and class 3 is a member of the township committee, they could not participate. So I gotta think about, I hear what you're saying, I just gotta think about how that will actually work, because you're not saying you're only applying for preliminary site plan and you wanna come back for final. You want preliminary and final now, is that correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
So
Yes.
I hear what you said, just gotta think about it. So
Right. And again, I liken it to a change of use, which is sometimes
Yeah,
requires.
maybe a
tenant.
tenancy review, maybe the condition. of
Tenancy review.
Tenancy review.
Absolutely, but the point I'm trying to get across is that we're not trying to do something where we're sneaking in a warehouse use, because it's not the intent, that's not the application. And we are offering up as a extra layer of comfort for this board and for the public, an additional review, so that when we are about to occupy or find the tenant that's going to occupy the premises, this board will have the final say to make sure that we are living up to our word, that this is a light industrial use and not a warehouse, not a fulfillment center or a last mile.
What you're saying is, rather than just have the zoning officer do the tenancy review, which might be viewed as not, in the public domain, so to speak, you would have the board do the tenancy review. That would be the condition.
Yes,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Again, anything I say during this hearing, don't think I'm in favor or against or anything. The people, I recognize some people in the public from being here in other applications. You know how I operate. I'm always trying to think about 1, 2, or even 3 steps ahead, depending on which way the thing goes and what we might have to do. So that's why a lot of times I ask questions and you guys might be thinking, what's he even asking about that now for? That's why. Keep on going. I'm also known to interrupt people, so
well, I'm used to people interrupting me. I have
that's good then.
3 daughters at home, so I understand it all too well. So yes, if, again, what we're going to be addressing as part of this application are the typical site plan and variance criteria. We're going to be discussing the site development details, lighting, impervious coverage calculations, parking, circulation, adequate utilities, building size, location, stormwater runoff, and things of that nature. And again, I would like to ask that the board and the public just maintain and focus their questions of our professionals that are related to these MLUL statutory criteria for site plan review. And again, not get into the minutia of warehouse versus light industrial, because that's not what this application is. And I think it could just derail everybody's timing here. And I don't think we want to go off the rails and just discuss questions that are not relevant to our application. And again, I say this with the utmost respect for this board, only to avoid confusion, to assist with maintaining a focused cross-examination and participation. In no way do I mean to insult anybody about how I'm going to make my presentation. It's obviously up to the board, but I'm just trying to keep it focused for the benefit of everybody, since there's such a large crowd here this evening. As for the bulk variants that are being sought as part of this application, we understand that on paper, this does appear to be asking for a lot of relief. However, if you delve into the requested relief for the variances that we are seeking, you'll note that much of the variances are more of a product of the site conditions and the site location and the existing conditions on the site. For example, 5 or so of the variances are due to keeping the existing structure that's already on the site to remain. Again, we have that as an accessory building, but we'll go into a little detail because there is some wiggle room on whether or not we could do away with that building. And there are 4 or 5 variances that are required in order to provide access to the site, which, if they're not granted, would essentially landlock and zone the property into inutility. All of the buffer requirements along the street, that's our only means of access that we have to the site. So there has to be some disturbance in order for us to have any vehicular access and to meaningfully develop the site. So a lot of these variances that we're asking for are either existing conditions or they are due to the fact that we need access to the site for any development. And again, that's why it seems like we're asking for what I think are more than what we really need here. The remaining couple of variances we feel are de minimis, but we will address each of them in greater detail when our professionals are ready to testify. Now, that's all I have, but before I introduce my witnesses, I just want to confirm the receipt of the KMA planning memorandum dated March 1st, 2025. I think that was our only planning memo.
Planning memo we have is from April 26, 2024. Oh, he's talking about
Yes.
your
KMA.
Oh, the board's memo.
Yes, sorry. The KMA planning memorandum that we received from Ms. Lilly, that was dated March 1st,
Right,
2025.
and you should have a March 7 engineering memo from Finelli Consulting.
That's correct. There were prior issues, but I think they were all consumed in Mr. Good's most recent review letter of March 7th. The other were more
Yeah.
completeness items anyway.
Before we get into witnesses, my practice, I swear in all your witnesses and all the board witnesses right at the top, just so I don't forget to do it later. But before I do that, again, once I swear on all the witnesses, when they're called one by one, any expert witnesses are gonna have to be qualified as an expert. So the applicant will take their witnesses, his witnesses through their qualifications. And when the board chair opens it up for questions on qualifications, that's gonna be questions about the expert's qualifications as an expert only, not about anything to do with the site plan yet, because they haven't testified yet.
Okay, are you gonna open it up to the public for questions on my qualifications of my witnesses or
Yeah,
just the board?
everyone has the opportunity to ask qualification questions.
Okay.
So can you have all your experts stand up first so they can identify
Absolutely.
themselves?
We may be missing one, but he'll be sworn in when he gets here. I don't know if he testified tonight anyway, and if not, we'll swear him in next time.
Okay,
I
so-
have two, if you wanna come up
Yeah,
closer,
come
maybe
up.
just so we can see you in the camera.
Hey, can you identify yourself, please?
Kyle Ferrier, last name's Ferrier.
Okay, and I assume you're an RA, a registered architect in the state of New
Yes.
Jersey?
Yes,
Okay,
Sure. Jonathan Istrani, Istrany. I am the civil engineer for the project. I have my professional engineering license in New Jersey. My license is in good standing.
and let's have the board experts identify themselves.
Bryce Good, Valley Consulting Engineers, Land Use Board Engineer.
And,
Kendra Lely, Kyle McManus and Associates Board Planner.
okay, so can the four of you raise your right hand? Does everyone swear or affirm the testimony you're gonna give in this application will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes.
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 Okay. Thank you, take it away.
Thank you, Ms. Lely, I'm sorry, I've been pronouncing your name wrong. People call me Lapari all the time, I rarely correct them, it's Lapari, but I understand it.
Okay. I called you, look, okay,
Did you? Well, it's Lapari.
thank you.
Yours is an easy one.
Yeah, it is.
So my first witness will be our project engineer, Jonathan Istrani. Mr. Istrani. I'll wait till you get up. As you heard Mr. Drill state, we're gonna walk you through your credentials. So if you could please provide your professional licenses and educational background for the benefit of the board and the public.
Sure. For the board's reference, again, my name Jonathan Istrani with Stonefield Engineering, located at 92 Park Avenue in Rutherford, New Jersey. I'm a partner with the firm. I have a professional engineering license in the state of New Jersey. My license is in good standing. I've been in the field of land development for about 15 years now, working on projects such as the one being presented before you tonight.
Have you appeared or testified before any other boards? in the
Yes,
state of
I
New
have
Jersey?
hundreds. This will be my first time before this board here tonight, so I'm excited.
Give some idea, what boards in Warren County have you tested, have you been qualified? as an
So
expert?
I actually had to go through here. I don't believe I have testified as an expert in the field of civil engineering in Warren County. I will give you an example of some of the last hearings.
Hunterdon County?
100 and trying to think of towns in there. Like, just to give you a flavor, like the last few hearings that I've done, were in Fairlawn, South Amboy, Norwood,
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
Elizabeth,
slow.
Montville. Sorry.
Fairlawn, Bergen County,
Fairlawn, South Amboy,
Middlesex,
Norwood,
Bergen,
Elizabeth,
Union,
Montville,
Morris,
Bordentown.
Stump the man.
Yeah.
Burlington.
I
Burlington.
think it's- Yeah.
Okay, so this is your first time wanting to be qualified as an expert in Warren County and Greenwich Township.
Yes.
There's gotta be a first for everything.
That's it.
Anyone have any questions on his qualifications as a professional engineer? You accept him?
I accept.
Okay,
Thank you very much. Jonathan, if you could please, I know you have a lot of material you want to get covered tonight, so rather than me interrupt you, why don't you just start with the your
Sure.
outline?
As a matter of housekeeping, just because I know there were gonna be a lot of people here tonight, and I apologize, Ms. Parker, I'm gonna grab those exhibits that you have here.
Sorry about
I have half-size exhibits that I can hand out to the board, and then we obviously have the easel with the full-size exhibits that I can point towards the public.
that would be very good.
So the first exhibit that I will hand out, is the aerial exhibit. If you don't mind just passing that. down.
So while you're doing that, I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna ask your attorney to mark, so you have a large size exhibit.
Question.
Hold up. So I'm gonna ask you to mark the large size exhibits.
Absolutely.
And the large size exhibits are not, they're not attached permanently to those boards, they're clipped to the boards, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and you gotta put that somewhere so everyone can see them. Excellent. Okay, ma'am, you have a procedural question?
Thank you. My name's Elizabeth
Up right here.
here.
Yep.
I'm
All the way up.
all the way up
All
to
the
the
way up.
microphone.
Yeah. Now, can you identify yourself?
Elizabeth Hoyt, Hoyt.
And the question is?
The question is, does the civil engineer have a background in geology, the geology of Warren County?
Can I ask you something?
Yes,
When I asked, does anyone have any questions on his qualifications?
yes.
That would have been time to ask that.
I raised my hand, but
I
didn't
didn't
see
see it,
me.
so why don't we? All right, can you answer that question? All right, this is, then after the fact qualification question.
Sorry, I came up here like there was a mic here. So I don't have a background in geotechnical engineering. I did go to school for geotechnical engineering. I worked for a few years with the Army Corps and other private firms in geotechnical engineering. I'm not here to testify in the field of geotechnical engineering. There was a separate geotechnical professional who has prepared a geotechnical report, as well as I believe they're doing supplemental testing for phase 2 level of testing that is also being prepared. I'm not here to testify to that.
So what you're, to answer her question, if I'm understanding you correctly, you have some background in geotechnical engineering, but you're not proposing to be accepted as an
Correct.
expert in geotechnical engineering.
I'm here to speak to the site improvements.
I only ask that because Warren County's geology is perhaps different from the other counties that you mentioned.
Okay, you still accept him as an expert?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So I marked this exhibit A1 already. It is
Okay,
the,
just show me where it's marked.
Yeah,
sorry,
there's a tab which states exhibit in the bottom right-hand corner. It's labeled A1.
Can you put today's date on it?
Yes, I can.
Yep.
March 13, 2025. This is the same as the hand that was passed out, Jonathan?
correct, yes.
Okay,
And
and this is labeled aerial exhibit by Stonefield Engineering, drawing 1 of 1. And there's a date of February 13th, 2025.
Okay, great.
so what this exhibit shows, this is a blown up version of the aerial map that is on the cover sheet of the site plans that were previously submitted to the board. And what this does is it just provides the board and the public a reference for where the site is. I'm sure the board and the public are very familiar with where the site is located, but if they will humor me, I'll just go through the site and some of the items in the surrounding. So the parcel is approximately 43.4 acres overall. The proposed project is proposing disturbance or a limit of development of approximately 25.1 acres. So it's a little bit less than 60% of that parcel. I call this parcel pork chop shaped, but just for the board's reference, who's looking at the exhibit as well as the public, north is to the top of the page. So at the top of the page, you have I-78, the associated way stations and exit 6. To the east of the page, you will have Bloomsbury Road, which is a county road, as well as Franklin Township beyond across Route 78 there. To the south of the parcel, you have Route 173, which is a DOT road with the Musconetcong River beyond, and then additionally, you can see Bloomsbury further south across the river there. To the west of the property, you have additional farmland, like this farmland, tree lines, and just there's a couple single-family homes along Route 173 as well. The existing property is generally used for agricultural purposes. It's a lot of farm fields. There's a couple tree lines that separate the farm fields from one another. And then there's also an existing farmhouse located centrally along the frontage. It's a residence that's occupied. There's some associated sheds and other structures along with that that we'll talk about in a moment in terms of renovating that structure. So with that, I'm just giving the board a reference for where the site is. I'm going to present my second exhibit, which is a site rendering.
Which is gonna be exhibit A2.
So while our attorney is marking this exhibit A2, this is the site plan rendering. It's sheet 1 of 1. The date prepared, Mike, if you don't mind reading that off.
Yeah, the date prepared is March 1st, 2020. March 10, 2025.
Yes, it is March 10th.
And you're gonna put today's date under exhibit A2, March 13, 2025, correct?
That is correct. It's identified in the top right-hand corner of the exhibit.
I just been told the other room they can't see this.
I don't know where the cameras are.
Camera's right here.
I don't know how we can do both
No,
at
no,
the
no,
same
no.
time.
If you put it this way, that thing has a camera on top of it. Just turn the exhibit.
See that over there.
No, you watch this.
John, that's the camera. With the closed circuit TV, that's the only.
Oh, that's the closed circuit TV camera?
So I'll have to put it on that side.
Yeah. Put it behind these two board members, please. Mr. Bean, you're gonna be in charge of making sure the exhibit doesn't not get knocked down.
I'll do my best. You gotta make sure you smile, because now you're gonna be focused on the camera.
Yeah. This will kill two birds with one stone. This will also provide.
For the owl.
The owl can see it now, and can someone, not Mr. Bean. I want you to go back and forth.
I'm sorry, you just texted me, so I just texted him back.
That's if they can see it now.
I'm waiting to.
Seems like some members of the public can't see the exhibit now.
Yeah.
Second one?
Um,
Pull back.
It's very easy. Like this. Yeah.
I didn't get a response yet. I can call him.
Just call over there and ask.
Can we send some of the extra?
Yeah, do we have extras?
I mean, there's some here.
Anytime a board member gets up and leaves the room, you're now gonna have to listen to a recording. Because you missed a couple
Right.
things.
Well, actually, I was in the room listening to it.
Yeah, but on your trip down the hall, you weren't. Give me a minute.
Take a brief
You devote to the
recess
exhibit?
until you get back.
Yeah.
Can't see it because we did move it. It's over by the copier. Now,
behind me.
Gary. Leaving, it's behind Gary. There you go. Do you see Gary? At ball? What do you see?
I mean, I don't think it's like, this is Zoom piece, right?
See most of the way.
Yeah, but just
Don't see Paul.
plug it in.
I'll wait till Mr. Gilbert
That might just be the easiest way to do it.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure there is. Can you, so you don't see Paul beam on the screen over there? You wanna go like that? Yeah. Okay.
Would it help if we, is there an opportunity or to patch in a thumb drive?
Yeah. Okay, let me let them know and I'll call you back if I need you.
Yes.
This is not being broadcast in here.
It's only a 20-inch screen over there, so it's really hard to see.
I will say this, the next hearing session, we're gonna move to the school, but we're gonna try to, keep on going here. You only have one copy of all these large exhibits here?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. show me on the plan set where the depiction of A1 and A2 is.
A1 is on sheet C1.
Because I have a large. Here,
Oh, that might help. Yeah.
okay, this is P16 and P1 of the P15. I want to see how big it is on there. Yeah, on the record, please.
So it's this map here. So on C1, it's the aerial map. It is obviously not as big as the exhibit, but every submitted site plan has it. And then for exhibit A2, which is the colorized rendering, this is a colorized version of the site plan sheet, which is sheets C6.
Show me C6, please.
So. It doesn't, this sheet C6 also includes additional dimensions and callouts that aren't shown on this rendering, just for the sake of artistic license. But it's the same sheet, it's just colorized.
You have someone from your team who can hold these things up in front of the. Listen, we're not up to questions right now.
Let me just have a
You
conversation.
have someone on your
I'm
team.
gonna figure that out. Do we have an extra poster board? Any extra poster boards?
I mean, we could grab some of the
Because there's an
poster
extra
boards here.
easel that we could
Yeah.
prop up if we had to.
Why don't we take a 5-minute recess, try to get a piece of poster board and get a set of those plans on there, but my preference is not to take my plans, to take, see if one of your team has a set, if they don't take my plans.
All right, 5-minute recess.
You have another set, anything?
Oh, do we need to put that in the other room?
Yes, take it over.
Yeah, we can have him take it over.
Yeah, you take it over.
He's bigger than me anyway. Are we ready?
Let's let him get that exhibit over there.
Okay.
Board members, I have additional mini sets of 11 by 17. Does anyone else on the board want one of these sets before I start offering them to the public? Right?
Maybe keep one back just in case someone changes their mind, John.
Good idea.
Yeah, that's it on here.
Do you have one of these in the office? I'll give you 2 for the office, 1 to give away, 1 to keep in the office. Pick those 2. Yep.
These are all nice, still nice. These are all on our website, correct?
Correct.
Right.
Yeah, yep.
All right,
Okay, continue.
let's go.
Okay, so I just want to comment, because I know we're having,
Nice and loud.
yes. To address these logistical issues with our exhibits, and I understand that there are other people in the other room. Mr. Drill has indicated that our next hearing, assuming we don't get our vote tonight, will be at a different location that can accommodate more people in the single room.
Presumably, just so you know, the board's regular meeting night would put our next meeting at what date? April what?
April 10th.
April 10th. So we're gonna try to get the school for April 10th. That's gonna take our board secretary working with our township clerk, to try to make those arrangements. Now, if for some reason we don't get the school by April 10th, then we're gonna be forced to come back here and deal with it. but that's gonna be the plan.
Understood, and I accept the plan. Well, my only comment is that for the members of the public that are not in this immediate room, that are watching on the TV and listening on the speakers, we will make sure that that Mr. Estrani returns, even if he concludes tonight, he will return at the next hearing to answer any questions, just to address the public's concern that they may have not had an opportunity to ask him those questions, or if they have any clarifications for something that maybe they didn't pick up on the recording,
And I
so.
want to add one thing to that, and that is, all these documents are up on the township's website, so that people can look at them. And I walked over all the large copies of the plans that the site plans the board had, and we swapped them out. The board now has 11 by 17s, and I just gave them out throughout the audience in the garage, but they're all on the website.
Yes, okay, and again, I just want to make sure that we will make sure that everybody has an opportunity to hear our presentation, hear our testimony, and ask questions of our witnesses at the next hearing if they don't have an opportunity to do so at tonight's hearing. Hopefully, we have an opportunity to do both, but I want to make sure that everybody's aware of that before we proceed. But that's all I have to say before Mr. Estrani continues with his engineering testimony.
So exhibit A2, you said is which sheet of the plans that I just brought over there?
I believe, sorry, let me pull it up here. It
Now,
is, sheet C6.
C6, okay. Tell her, whatever you want to tell them about this exhibit A2, C6, go ahead.
Sure, I know we took a little bit of a detour, but just to give you an idea of how I'm gonna progress through this, I'm going to give an overview of all the site improvements that are being proposed as part of this project. Then I'm gonna go into the zoning for the project a little bit, and then I'm going to address the review letters that we received earlier this month. So to get this started, again, I have sheets exhibit A2, which is the colorized version of sheet C6. It shows the site improvements that are being proposed as part of this project. And to start, the applicant, as the attorney has already outlined, we are proposing a light industrial building. The square footage is 185,850 square feet. In terms of dimensions, that's 885 feet wide, 210 feet deep. To support that building, the applicant is proposing 372 parking spaces overall, where 362 parking spaces are required per the municipal code. So the applicant is proposing sufficient parking to meet the municipal code demand for that light industrial building. It should be noted, a few things to break that down. Of those 372 spaces, there are 7 ADA spaces, and then 1 additional ADA space.
ADA means,
ADA is accessible, like I don't want to use the term handicap, but an accessible parking space. So it's the Americans with Disabilities Act is the full term. So 7 accessible parking spaces. One of those, or I should say an additional accessible parking space will be what we call EV. It'll have an electric vehicle charger for a total of 8 accessible parking spaces. In addition to the 1 accessible EV parking space, there will also be 15 other EV charging parking spaces. Those parking spaces will be 10 by 20. That's 10 feet wide by 20 feet long, which is per municipal code for parking space dimension. In addition to that, there will be 321 standard parking spaces for employees and visitors going to the site. Those parking spaces are located centrally on the site, adjacent to the building. And then there are also 28 what I'll call van parking spaces. Those are 10 feet wide by 25 feet deep. Those are located on what I'll refer to as the east side of the site or the right side of the page. You'll see them furthest away from the building in the last row of parking. Now, in addition to the parking space sizes, the applicant is also proposing 54 loading docks along the rear of the building. Those docks are 13 feet wide by 60 feet deep. And then at the ends of the building, on the east and west ends, the corner of the building, so will be what we call drive-in ramps. It will have the ability to drive a vehicle inside the facility. And then in addition to that, in the rear of what I'll call the truck courtyard, so opposite the loading docks, there will be 138 what we'll call trailer spaces. And those spaces are 11 feet wide and 55 feet deep. And of those 138 trailer spaces, 64 of them are what I'll call a tandem configuration. That means that they're basically two deep. So it'll be 64 of those. There were some comments from both the engineer and the planner about bicycle parking. I would note that there are 40 bicycle parking spaces proposed as part of the project. They are located in what I'm going to call the northwest corner of the building. It's identified on sheet C6 and called out. They will be exterior bike racks that are mounted to the building. They will accommodate 40 parking spaces or 40 bicycle spaces, which based on our interpretation of the code, we comply because 38 are required, where 40 are proposed. There was a comment from the board engineer basically indicating whether or not we should provide additional bicycle parking to account for the trailer spaces as part of that calculation versus just taking the passenger spaces. The applicant has no preference. If the board feels strongly that we need to add additional bicycle parking on site, we can do that. I think that would bring the total bicycle parking to 51 spaces if needed. Now, there was some discussion about the farmhouse that is located currently on site. If you're looking at sheet C6 or at the rendering this exhibit, it's located centrally at the bottom of the page, which is plan south. It's an existing farmhouse with some driveway improvements. There's a shed, there's some chicken coops and other improvements in the back of the facility there. As part of this project, what the applicant originally intended to do was to renovate that farmhouse facility and convert it into a meeting space for the tenants, for the future tenants. So should somebody want to have a meeting with potential customers, visitors, et cetera, they could potentially have it in that farmhouse. There are some zoning complications with trying to use that farmhouse as that kind of meeting office space. You heard a little bit from the attorney that should the board feel strongly, because there are about 5 or 6 zoning relief items related to the use of having that farmhouse as an accessory use or building.
Hold it. This one's this is a use variance. This is not a C variance. If you
Let me clarify.
continue to propose that,
Let me clarify.
yeah,
I will. So what we're permitted to use this accessory building, if it remains on site pursuant to your zoning code, would be for storage associated with the principal use.
correct.
If we are to keep the building, we have, well, let's put it this way. We have 3 options for this building at this point in time. We can use it for the storage as permitted as an accessory use under your code. We can leave it vacant and just maintain the building so that we don't demolish it and it sits there to the extent that anybody likes the look of the building. It doesn't add any value to the project and it's in the buffer. So the third option is that we remove the building. We can demolish the building, and along with demolishing the building, we demolish the variances that are associated with the building.
Right.
That would be our preference. The reason we didn't do that in the beginning from the outset was there was some discussion way back when we first started exploring this project that there was some historical significance to the building. We did research the building and we found that it is not listed on any register as an historical property. We could not identify any historical significance to the building. But it was brought up to our attention that there could be some historical significance to the building to some historical period. It's unclear, but we didn't want to just simply demolish the building if that was the
Listen,
case.
let's cut to the chase. You're withdrawing your proposal to use the building as office, correct?
Absolutely correct. There's no
That
proposal
will-
to be used
right.
as an office.
That would eliminate the use variance and keep the application for now at the plant, at this board as sitting as a planning board, not as a board of adjustment. And so what you're basically saying to the board is, your preference is to demolish it. If they want you to leave it there and use it for storage, you'll do that. If they want you just to leave it there, but they like how it looks, they have to recognize you're gonna have to grant a bunch of C variances to do that, but you're willing to demolish it. And basically, other than not using it as an office, you will, if the board grants approval, you'll do whatever the board wants done with that building. Is that correct?
Absolutely. Except use it for anything that's not permitted. We will not
Correct.
do that.
Okay,
Thank you.
Beat me to it. I apologize. I was just giving some background, but the attorney covered that pretty well. So I will move on from the farmhouse. When I will refer to it in terms of things like the buffer, in terms of the options that we have, for example, demolishing it and returning it to a native vegetative state would obviously have benefits to the buffer there. But we will touch upon that when we get into the landscaping. So in terms of site access for the project, the site technically fronts on two roadways.
Louder.
So the two roadways are Route 173, which is a state highway. And then the second road is technically I-78, but it is an off-ramp and the site will not be able to get access to that roadway. So the only access point for this project is from Route 173. What the applicant is proposing in terms of access is what we call a full movement driveway located in the southeast corner of the property. If you're looking at the plans, it's the bottom right of the page. That will be the only access point into the site. It has been sized and designed for both emergency vehicles as well as the anticipated truck traffic for the site, in addition to the employees, staff, and visitors driving in standard passenger vehicles.
What approval, if any, from the NJDOT would that require?
So we would be seeking an access permit from the DOT. An application has been made and submitted to the DOT. It is currently under review. We're awaiting some feedback and the typical back and forth with revisions and feedback that you would see for this. But we have presented the idea of this type of access in this location of the site, and they have responded, I'm not going to call it positively, but obviously they haven't outright said, no, you cannot have a driveway at this location. We will also have a traffic engineer who will be testifying after me, who will touch upon more details regarding site access and a DOT permitting. So outside of that, I just wanted to touch briefly on signage, just because there were some questions about it. As our attorney spoke to, there are no tenants specifically chosen for this site at this time. So the applicant's stance is that they will look to comply with the signage when that application comes in, when that tenant comes in with the type of signage package that they want. We have shown a placeholder, I'll call it, for a monument sign located at the site driveway. The intent is for that monument sign to comply with all municipal signage ordinances in terms of setback, height, area, illumination, etc. We're simply showing it there to give the board an idea of what that would look like. Obviously, that sign will be there for wayfinding. It's really the only sign that you would see as you drive past the site, identifying the development there.
So again, the applicant is proposing a condition that would say all signage shall comply with all ordinance requirements, correct?
At this time, yes. I mean, if a future tenant wanted to have a larger wall sign at that point,
They'd
they would
have to
have to
come
come
in.
back, yes. Now, in terms of, I'll call grading and topography for the project site. As anyone who's driven by the site can see, there is a large grade change from Route 173 as you head back into the site. It's about 105 feet of grade difference from the roadway to the highest point of the farm field, all the way at the tip, the northern tip of the property. The slope across the site on average is about 10%. And what that means, it's about 1 foot, apologies, 1 foot of vertical drop per 10 feet of vertical or horizontal run for that 10% slope. So what you'll see on the grading plan and what the applicant has outlined to do is to try and balance the earthwork on site. And what that means is they have established a flat area for the building and the improvements located centrally on the site. They will be filling the front of the site and using retaining walls. And in the rear of the site, they will be cutting back and also using retaining walls. Those retaining walls will vary in height depending on the location. The wall heights will generally vary from about 3 feet to 30 feet. The composition of the walls hasn't been decided yet. It's very typical or likely that it would be some sort of segmental block retaining wall with geogrid reinforcement. But again, at this time, the applicant has a few different options to consider, and there is additional geotech testing being done for that. But I just want to touch on the retaining walls for that. So in the front of the site, you will see that the parking lot in front of the building will be elevated with the retaining wall. And then in the back where you have the truck courtyards, there will either be an earthen slope or another retaining wall into the hill there. And again, the site, I would say the development is considered on the low side in the back, the northern half of the site, and it's on the high side on the southern slash front of the building.
Yeah, procedural question, this might be for the attorney, but it might be for you.
Mhm.
If you don't have the details of the retaining wall now, how could the board grant final site plan approval for that? You're gonna submit them before the time that you're gonna ask them to vote?
Well, I think we have pretty much a good idea of what, and John, correct me if I'm
Yeah, a
wrong.
good idea is good for preliminary, like he just said, that there's no details, they're not sure. of
Well,
what type of-
What I would ask is, if we're not seeking, any option that we're proposing is not seeking a variance. So whether,
Understood.
right, so what we're asking for is, we know the location of the wall. Obviously, some site details are gonna dictate whether or not, certain details are employed or not.
Right.
And we would ask that we work with your engineer. If your engineer has a problem or says that this is
The
not,
board has to decide. What you're asking the board to do then is to grant final, preliminary and final site plan approval, and at least that's to the retaining wall. Maybe the board doesn't care about the details and they're willing to delegate that to the engineer, but in most applications that at least this board gets or my other client boards get, they won't grant final site plan approval unless all the details are there. They're not gonna delegate it to their engineer, but we can.
we can, well, I think what we can do, we can provide a detail, but it might be subject to a field change that we would then work with your engineer. And again, those are these
A
on-site.
field change is a different situation.
That's-
If it's insubstantial change, if it's substantial change, you'd have to come back. But I think if you want final site plan approval, you gotta submit details for our engineer to review and then, give his advice to the board, will that work? And the planner, if
We
people
can do that.
obviously are gonna see this thing, how will it look? You said
Right.
there's gonna be a 30-foot high wall. That's like the Green Monster in Boston.
Well, I I respectfully disagree because we've had projects where we construct them. They don't look as imposing as they sound.
You have.
But
Right, do you have a picture in these plans of what this 30-foot retaining wall looks like?
We can provide you something.
Yeah. So I just want to add on a couple things. One, when the architect goes up, they have 3D rendering showing the wall and what it would look like in relation to the building for scaling and massing, so you can get an idea of that when they come up and testify. Additionally, I mean, again, the applicant is willing to work with you. I'm just trying to figure out the exact level of detail, because for example, normally in my experience, retaining wall plans, engineering plans like are submitted post-approval as part of like the building department process. If you wanted a typical cross-section and like
If it was a
Our wall
3-foot, 4-foot, 5-foot, even I'd say 9-foot wall, I'd agree with you. 30-foot, you're telling me that you have a project where you got final site plan approval somewhere from some board in New Jersey for a 30-foot high wall without giving them the details ahead of time? They let you do it after?
yes,
Where was that?
it's actually
Suffolk County?
a project in Wanacue, New Jersey.
Yes, and I was the attorney on that project, so I can confirm that that's the case. Again, these are these engineering details. We have no problem working it out. What we can do, though, to alleviate any concerns that you raise is we'll provide you with something, and again.
Yeah.
It'll be somewhat conceptual, somewhat not conceptual, and the fact that this is what we reasonably
Why
anticipate.
don't you make it your proposal so they could, if they
Because-
get to that point, they could approve it, and then if you, again, want to field change it or come back and change it, you change it.
Well, that's what we'll do based upon what you're telling us
Yeah.
right now.
Well-
We're coming back.
Listen, that's my advice. I don't know if all the board members agree with me or not. Some board members might not agree. So you could straw poll them.
I agree with you.
Let's quick straw poll. You will, if you got to that point, without details of the 30-foot high retaining wall, would you feel comfortable granting final site plan approval and delegating it to Bryce?
No.
No.
Sorry, Mr. Good.
Okay.
I,
Remember,
we had,
Against you.
it's nothing against him.
Aesthetics to it.
I understand. What we'll do is we will provide you with something prior to the next hearing. But again, a lot of these details need to be worked out once we're in the field and we start digging. In the case that we get an approval, and that's where we usually employ the town engineer to make sure that it
Some
jives.
people go out and do the testing first and don't try to figure it out after they start digging, just saying, but keep on going.
Okay, with that, I'll move on to drainage and stormwater management as an overview. So as I mentioned before, the limited disturbance for the project is about 25.1 acres. The impervious footprint is 15.3 acres, and of that 15.3 acres, 10.3 is what I'm going to call motor vehicle surface, which is basically anything that a car, truck would drive on. It's a separate distinction in the DEP now, because those are the areas that you treat for water quality.
Okay, so I assume then 16.3 minus 10.3 is 5 acres. 5 acres would be what, the concrete under the building and sidewalks and things like that?
Correct, yes. So based on the scale of that disturbance and impervious footprint, the project is defined per the local ordinance and state ordinance at the DEP level as a major development. And what that means is that the project needs to meet stormwater parameters for runoff quantity, runoff quality, and groundwater recharge. So I'm gonna give you an overview of the stormwater management design. Certainly, I'm gonna, I imagine, get into it with Mr. Good over some of the nitty-gritty stormwater details, but for the board's reference, the site, as I mentioned before, is high on the northern side, low on the southern side. The farmland, everything is draining towards Route 173. There are 3 culverts, pipes located along Route 173, which collect water from the project site and discharge it underneath Route 173, ultimately into the Muscatong River. Muscatecon. I knew that.
So you were practicing that one, that.
I know, it's a matter of time. Anyway, so there are 3 culverts that collect runoff from the entire project site and discharge it to the waterway. Under proposed conditions, the applicant is looking to maintain those drainage patterns, except they will be incorporating a stormwater management system. There will be 14 stormwater management facilities throughout the project site, throughout the limit of development, that will capture the runoff generated from this development. Those facilities, to give the board a rundown, there will be 6 small-scale bioretention facilities that will have an under drain system. There will be 2 small-scale bioretention facilities that will use infiltration. There will be 4 permeable pavement systems that will use infiltration, and there will be 1 large-scale underground infiltration basin. And on top of that, there will be 1 additional, what I'm going to refer to as an MTD, which is a manufactured treatment device, which is basically a manufactured device that provides green infrastructure on a smaller scale. And I'm going to talk about how that's used as well.
So what sheet of the plans show these 14 stormwater management facilities?
That is sheet C8. So through a combination of these small scale and large scale facilities, the applicant is providing their green infrastructure requirements, and they're providing stormwater management that meets the 3 parameters that I talked about previously. And again, that's runoff quantity, runoff quality, and groundwater recharge. In addition to that, just to give the board some background, there have been changes in the stormwater rules over the last several years in terms of green infrastructure components as well as climate change factors. All of those components have been utilized in this design. So it is compliant, again, per municipal standards, and we are confident it's compliant per DEP standards, NJDEP. This project will be submitting an application to the NJDEP due to activities within the flood hazard area, riparian zone, and as part of that, they will also be reviewing the stormwater management design in addition to the board's engineer.
So again, I want to put everything on the table as things come to me. So I'm hearing what you're saying. I'm looking in Mr. Good's March 7th memo on page 15. And so item 73, for example, he says for every infiltration BMP, a minimum of 2 soil profile pits must be excavated within the infiltration area, blah, 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 blah. Now, I don't think I'm going to ask him. I just asked him, so I know the answer. So I'm going to ask him in public, but I know the answer. Are you suggesting that this would be conditions of approval, or you want to see these things again before they? I'm not talking about preliminary. This for preliminary approval, you have to prove all these things are feasible. But for final, you need the details. So are you saying you want to see that before you would recommend to the board grant final site plan approval?
Yes, based upon the site grading and the location of these BMPs and the lack of information, that would be necessary for final approval.
Okay, you have a choice. You could split it, and just go for preliminary now if you don't want to spend the extra engineering money to do all this stuff. But if you want preliminary and final, I'm just being upfront with you. My advice to the board is gonna be, you know, preliminary is one thing, but to grant final approval where you're supposed to have all the details, and Bryce has, you know, let me tell you how many. Oh, got 122 comments in his memo. Now, not all of them are asking for details, but a lot are. Then you gotta figure out what you wanna do.
Can you please re-identify the paragraph that you're speaking of so that I'm clear on what we need to discuss and figure out?
Paragraph 73 on the top of page 15, that's one example.
Okay.
Another example would be number 77.
Oh, being performed now.
We understand the issue. We will discuss internally prior to the next hearing whether or not we can provide that to you. And then we will discuss also whether or not we can do that depending on how we wish to proceed. But I understand your concern and we will address it.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm gonna circle back to Mr. Good's review letter once I go through the general overview, and I'll leave it to the board on if we want to go point by point or how they want to approach that. But in the meantime, I want to talk about utilities for the project. With the exception of sanitary service, all utilities are available or can be made available from Route 173, and I'll give you a rundown of those utilities. The applicant has sought and obtained what we call will serve letters from these utility companies, where they essentially state that they are able and capable of providing service to the site, whether through existing infrastructure that's there or through maybe an extension of infrastructure as part of a agreement with the developer for the project. So just to run through it, for electric, the service provider is JCP&L. We do have a will serve letter from them. There are existing electrical service lines running down Route 173 today. So no additional infrastructure is anticipated at this time to pull power from those poles. The gas provider is Elizabethtown Gas. We have a will serve letter from them. We're currently sorting out where the gas main is located within Route 173 to see if an extension is needed to bring it into the site. We are getting mapping from them at this time. In terms of telecom, it is Comcast. They do have standard cable telecom service available on the poles on Route 173 today. They also mentioned that they can bring fiber optic service to the site if the applicant is seeking that level of service as well. But that would need to be extended from another section. Now, in terms of water, the water provider is Aqua NJ. There is no water main currently in front of the site along Route 173. The closest water main is a 12-inch water main closer to the Church Street intersection, about 2,000 feet to the west or to the left of the page. We have been in discussions with Aqua NJ about that water service to extend that water main down the road, down Route 173 to the site frontage to provide service. Sewer or sanitary for the project site will be provided through a septic system that is being proposed on the western portion of the site or on the left side of the page. That sewer or that septic system is currently under design. We have preliminarily sized that infrastructure and shown it and depicted it on the plans.
Yeah, what sheet is that shown on?
That is on the utility plans. Give me one moment.
C9.
C9.
You said it's on the west side?
Yes, the left of the page. So you'll see a box out area. There'll be a septic disposal field. So again, that's in the preliminary design stages, similar to what you mentioned before. There is some additional geotech testing that is being performed shortly. And then that septic system not only will need to get permitted through the county health department, but also through the NJDEP.
So, and it needs NJDEP, because how many gallons per day?
It will exceed the 2,000 gallon limit for a typical septic system, which would be done normally at the local level through the county health department. Because it exceeds that level of demand, it will get reviewed by the DEP as well.
How many gallons per day is anticipated?
I would not quote me on it,
Don't guess.
Okay. Under 10,000, I know that, what the
Right,
exact
under
number
10
is.
More than 2,000 and under 10,000.
Yes,
I have a quick question on the water.
yes,
I see a water tank on the property.
correct.
Does that have anything to do with the water source?
Yeah, so because of the grade change on site and because of what we are anticipating the fire suppression demand to be for a facility of this size, we have preliminarily shown a pump station and water tank for the project. Just again, I believe they're gonna be likely required, but a lot of it is gonna depend on hydrant flow testing that we get from Aqua NJ and then additional design items in terms of extending that main through down Route 173 to find out the level of pressure and flow that we can get for that project.
And what's the height of that tank?
I think currently it's depicted as 30 feet, but again, that's preliminary size.
And you're saying the water tanks for firefighting purposes only, or also for potable water for drinking?
It is intended to be for fire suppression. The typical domestic demands for a facility like this are not very high. The fire demand is gonna be much higher.
Got it.
So outside of utilities, I'm gonna touch upon lighting for the facility. There are a series of LED fixtures, both pole mounted and building mounted, that are proposed around the project site. There will be a total of 55 pole mounted light fixtures and 28 building mounted light fixtures. All those light fixtures will be mounted at 25 feet high, which is in compliance with the municipal ordinance. There were some notes both in the engineer's review letter, and I believe eventually the planner as well. We have notes on our lighting plan. The lighting plan is sheets C10. So those lights per municipal ordinance will be turned off between the hours of 11 PM and 6 AM, with the exception of what we're gonna call security lighting. As indicated in your code, we would work with the police department to determine what lights should be on for the purposes of security and maintain them throughout the night, while the remainder of the lights will be off during those hours.
We gotta go back to the water tank.
Yes.
If the water, I'm gonna ask, if you don't know, I'm gonna ask Kendra, what is the maximum height of an accessory structure in the Greenwich Township code?
Give me 1 second, I can pull that up. The maximum accessory structure height is 2 stories or 45 feet is what I have listed on the plans, sheet C5. And the tank is indicated at 30 feet.
Is there like a picture of it or some elevation or anything? Does the architect, will he have that?
I'm not sure. I don't believe so at this time.
Yeah, I would just check, section 16-15, sorry, 16-5.1D, accessory buildings shall not exceed 15 foot in height. We may need a variance for that.
Which ordinance section were you reading from? Witness.
I'm just reading off what's listed in our bulk table on our plans.
What the cited an ordinance section on that bulk table?
Unfortunately, I don't think we're listing the
What sheet of the plans has the bulk table?
sheet C5. Yeah.
Yeah, you have the ordinance sections in there. What ordinance section?
We're looking at ordinance section 16-18A.6.
We have a special accessory ordinance section in 16-18.
Okay.
Well, I would just suggest we'll get clarification on this. If we need to resize the tank, or if there's any exemptions, for, the firefighting, structures or apparatus. We'll clarify that.
It's
and we'll
fine,
come
you
back.
might need, because otherwise you might need another C variant.
Right, if we need
A
it, we'll
C
ask,
height variant.
right, if we need it, oh, I'm sorry, what was that? See,
You might need a C height
height
variant.
variant, correct, right, I thought that's what I heard. If we need it, we'll ask for it, if we, can resize the tank or make some modifications, we'll do that, but we'll make sure at the next hearing to provide you with an extra level of detail on the,
Yeah.
on the
When you
water.
say anything you're gonna provide, it's not really you're providing it at the next hearing, you're providing it before the next hearing session.
I will provide it to you 10 days prior to the next hearing.
At least 10 days. The board has a rule, 21 days beforehand, so that their experts can look at it and try to get a report to the board, not the day of the hearing. But
For almost 21 days to the
I
next hearing.
understand, so you're probably gonna wanna ask the board to waive the 21-day rule. They can't waive the 10-day rule if you want the thing approved.
Right, well, if there's a change in the plans, if it's simply an exhibit to show you what's proposed on the plans, I believe we can provide it within the
But if you
10-day
want-
period.
But if you want final site plan approval, you don't get final site plan approval of an exhibit. You get final site plan approval of details on a plan. So you gotta decide what you wanna do.
We will figure that out and let you know.
Okay, back to the topic of lighting. So I was discussing the lighting operational hours, as well as the coordination that the applicant's gonna seek with the police department to determine the specific light fixtures that will remain on for security purposes. It should also be noted that as part of the lighting design, there's no lighting spillover proposed to any of the neighbors' properties. And then in general, the lighting design is fully compliant with the exception of one item, which is the average level of illumination throughout the vehicular travel area. The municipal requirement is 1.5 foot candle, where the applicant is proposing 0.96 foot candles. Just to give the board and the public some reference for what this ends up being, we usually see a lot of lighting variances related to average foot candle levels because it's tough to pick the exact or calculate the exact average to be 0.5. It'll always be a little bit above or a little bit below, just because of the amount of calculation points that are done. For the board's reference and the public's reference, I keep mentioning foot candles. It's just another measure of brightness or luminance. It literally, the old school term, because imperial measurement system, it's the brightness of a single candle within 1 square foot. Right, so we're talking about a 1/2 foot candle versus just a little under 1 foot candle in terms of the average level of illumination through the vehicle parking lot area. So we believe that, again, it's an appropriate level of illumination for this area. And again, that is the one variance that we are seeking for lighting. And again, to confirm, the site is pulled back several hundred feet from the lot lines. There's no lighting spillover proposed to any of the neighbors' properties. So we do believe that this is a smaller variance that we believe is justified based on what we are proposing here. Now, in terms of landscaping, our landscape architects honestly had a lot of fun designing this. They have a very robust landscape design proposed as part of this project. I'm going to talk about a couple different things that they focused on as part of this landscape plan. One of them was the buffering along Route 173. And the second component was the revegetation of the farmland area around the site, and then the internal parking lot landscaped area. So overall, to give the board a flavor of the extent of landscaping that the applicant is proposing, they're proposing a total of 693 trees to be planted as part of this project. That is inclusive of 269 deciduous or shade trees and 424 evergreen trees. In addition to those trees, they are also proposing 879 shrubs with a mix of 588 standard deciduous type shrubs and 291 evergreen shrubs.
And all this, the stuff that you're talking about now, that's as reflected on sheets C13, C14, and C15?
Correct, yes. Well, C13 and C14, C15
It's
is
just the
just
notes.
details and notes,
Okay.
yes. So based on what the applicant submitted, they believe that they are compliant with all landscape requirements for the code. There were 2 items noted in Mr. Good's letter that we could eventually get to, but I could just touch on it now. One of them mentioned in his letter that the buffer being proposed along the highway frontage, he noted as 40 feet. We are noting it as 50 feet. Certainly, we would just want to know what area he believes is 40 feet, and we can add additional plantings if necessary, but we do believe that we are providing a full 50-foot compliant landscape strip along that frontage.
Okay, is this where, yeah, the gap where the house is?
I don't believe so, no, because he called it out as 40 feet, that gap there.
I know, I'm saying.
Yeah.
Right, we'll have to ask him where it's 40 feet and not 50 feet, but do you need some exception or some variance for not having any buffer where that house is?
I mean, we're not calling one out at this time. We are providing landscaping along the entire frontage wherever there is not existing development. Obviously, you have the farmhouse and the driveway there today.
But I'm looking at the exhibit, I'm saying, you're saying that you're proposing it along the entire frontage. I'm looking at the exhibit C, the landscape plan C14, it has a gap there.
Well, that's a pre-existing condition.
So,
So we're not planning to change anything. We're just we're continuing the condition.
this is an application for development.
Right.
So you're using the existing vegetation as your buffer? Is that-
Correct.
So.
Oh, you're saying that you have existing vegetation in front that meets the buffer requirement?
It may not be the full width.
It doesn't have evergreen in it, right? It's all
Right.
deciduous.
The idea here was that there was some discussion again, back and forth on what will be the ultimate fate of the farmhouse. If the farmhouse is to be removed
Right, if
or,
the board didn't care
Mhm.
about that farmhouse, and they said, we don't care if.
the
it's
applicant
removed,"
will extend the buffer the full width.
then you wouldn't need any variance for that buffer, correct?
Yes.
Can I say one thing?
No, no, you can't. You have to wait your turn. They got the floor. They're the applicant. That's how it works, unfortunately. I shouldn't even be interrupting them. I should just keep my mouth shut, but I think if I do that, it'll be more efficient. But if you want me to stop, I'll stop.
I think you're doing fine.
Okay, so there was also a requirement for internal parking lot landscaping. I believe the requirement is 8% of the parking lot, with the shrubs being no higher than 3 feet tall for site distance reasons. The applicant is providing 10%, and those shrubs again will be under 3 feet. There was some discussion about a maintenance plan for the internal lot landscaping. On sheets C13, the first page of the landscape plan, there is a maintenance schedule that outlines some of those responsibilities. Certainly, if the board is looking for additional detail on the maintenance of that landscaping, both internal to the lot and then around the facility, the applicant's more than happy to provide additional information for that.
I'm gonna get more specific on the landscaping, just to
Sure.
make sure that you guys understand what my advice to the board is gonna be. So I'm looking at Brace's memo, item 100 on page 18. So we're gonna have to, Bryce, can you just, we're all, on the edge of our seat. Where do they not have the 50-foot wide buffer? Where do you say it's only 40?
Based upon our review of the plans and our measurements, we're measuring 40 feet, not a specific location. We're measuring that buffer being 40 feet, not 50.
Okay, so you should contact offline
We will.
before the next hearing session on that one, item 100, item 101. The transition buffer plantings may be waived by the board if natural growth is found to the satisfaction of the board to be sufficient year round. So I want to specifically talk about I was talking in general before, I want to tie it into this ordinance. So this ordinance section, in my opinion, means that if you don't have evergreen in that area, see, I was looking at sheet C14, it looked like a gap, but I see what you guys are saying is you want to ask the board to waive the requirement that it be screened year round. But if you took the house down, then you wouldn't need that waiver, you would just plant it, because what you're saying is if the house remains, you want the house to be seen from the street?
I mean, there is a lawn area in front of the house. That was the idea, not to cover it up. But again, the applicant has no strong preference. They will.
If the house is there or not there, you could still meet the buffer requirement, right? You don't need to not meet the buffer requirement.
With the
there, correct?
exception of the driveway and what's needed
Yeah.
around the driveway for site triangle
Okay,
clearance.
Okay, I got it.
So since we were touching on landscaping overall, talking about the buffers along the frontage, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the environmental buffers on the site and how that ties into the municipal buffers that we were just referencing. So the applicant does have a, what I refer to as an LOI or a letter of interpretation from the NJDEP. It is a document stating that there are no wetlands or transition areas on the project site. The applicant filed for that determination to the DEP and they received that letter in 2014. That letter was submitted to the municipality. In addition to that, there is what I am referring to as an NHD letter or National Heritage Database letter. And again, in a similar fashion, the applicant submitted a request to the DEP to provide a list of any endangered or threatened species on the project site. The way that the letter is outlined, they have a list of species that could be on site, a list of species that could be within 1/4 mile of the site, and a list of species that could be within 1 mile of the site. So within the project boundaries itself, the letter stated that there are no endangered or threatened species on the project site itself. There are species within the immediate vicinity of the site. And based on a list of those species, as well as some other parameters that the DEP classifies for the adjacent waterway, it is considered what I'm calling a C1 waterway, or also known as a Category 1 waterway. And what that waterway means is that is considered pristine waters of New Jersey. And with that comes a 300-foot, what I'm referring to as a riparian buffer or riparian zone. In layman's terms, that is a stream buffer. The municipality has something very similar called a stream corridor or edge of river setback, and that's 250 feet. So the municipal buffer from the top of bank of the waterway is 250. The DEP buffer is 300. They do overlap one another. And the applicant is going to submit an application to the DEP for activities within that riparian zone, that 300-foot buffer.
Are you proposing any activities within 250 feet of the stream?
Yes.
So what relief do you need from the board for that?
So that's outlined in your board professionals letters, but I will talk about it momentarily. I do have one more exhibit to bring up, a buffer exhibit that will outline some of that. But the applicant is proposing driveway improvements and what I'll call associated site improvements so that some stormwater facilities and signage within that 250-foot buffer area. I was going to get into it a little bit later, but since we're on the topic, it's a 250-foot buffer from the river. And because the site is across from the river, separated by the highway, that buffer extends along the entirety of the site frontage where the site needs to get access for the facility.
250 feet from the top of the bank, 250 foot from the center of the stream?
From the top of the bank. Yes, the top of bank was surveyed, that was submitted as part of the documents. The 250-foot buffer is depicted on the site plan.
Yeah, what sheet?
Is you can see it either on sheet C5 or sheet C6. C6 would be easier because it's a zoomed in version.
Chair, while there's I'd like to ask for clarification. The LOI date, you said 2014?
I believe so, yes. I have a copy of the letter here.
Yeah, give us a date. And how long is that LOI good for?
It's good for 5 years. It can also be extended.
We did the wetlands delineation more recently. We did.
I have a, this is about this. I have a letter here from.
Excuse me. Was that 2014?
That's where we.
So sorry.
11 years ago?
I need some order. I apologize. 2024, last year.
Okay.
And yes, I have the actual date of that letter is March 27th, 2024, 2024, last year.
Thank you. Thank you for clearing that up.
I apologize. I
That's why
completely
everyone was
just,
like twitching.
yeah. Apologies for misspeaking there. So what I'll do to touch upon
Can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
If you put up this exhibit with the buffers, I'm sure that the people that are in the garage are not gonna be able to see it. So is it really necessary to do it this time, or can you do it next time? Why don't you talk to your attorney right now? You guys decide.
If I were to speak to the numbers in the exhibit, was that
Okay, you
okay?
can speak to the numbers, do you really need an exhibit to speak to the issue?
How about this? We can refer to.
I mean, take a look, it's on C6.
That's right.
You see the 250 edge, 250-foot edge of riverbank. And just for members of the public, again, these are the filed plans. This is not an exhibit. These are the filed plans, like I said before, which have been on the township website. And I just brought a whole bunch of those plans in there, which we didn't have to do, because once everyone gets the notice about it, a lot of people contacted the board secretary and made Oprah requests and had stuff sent to them, but it's also on the website to get for themselves. So everyone should have easy access to the site plan and can easily turn to sheet C6. So can I suggest that you do your testimony up to C6?
Yes, we will do our testimony off of C6 to the extent next time there are more questions about it, we'll have the exhibit prepared and we can discuss it.
Excellent.
As you mentioned, and I just want to clarify, all of the information that we are going to discuss is on the site plan and on sheet C6.
Yes.
The exhibit we're going to introduce possibly next time, just color codes, that makes it easier to
And
view.
also, a suggestion, if you submit your exhibits a couple days ahead of time via email digital, we can put them up on the website. So everyone, including board members and members of the public, can see the exhibits you're gonna submit. You're not, there's no requirement by law to do that. But if you do that, I think it will make things more efficient.
Well, in hindsight, it certainly would have tonight, so we will take that under consideration, make sure that we try to do that for the next hearing, and I do appreciate it.
Thanks, John. So, I'm just gonna speak to the numbers in it. It was just a nice visual, but just to give the board, reference, we were talking about a 200 for the municipality's purposes, there's a 250-foot stream corridor buffer that's required in your code. There's also another buffer, which is again shown on those same site plan sheets. It is what I'm gonna refer to as an LOD or limit of disturbance buffer. And that's 100 feet from a residential property, even if that property is across the street. So in this case, the parcel, even though it's owned by the same owner, it's a small sliver of property between the highway and the river. That is zoned as, I believe, the SH, the Hamlets District, which is residential. So we are providing a 100-foot buffer from that. And the reason that I wanted to bring these up is that, again, we have two buffers, one for the waterway, one for residential properties that are along the only frontage in which this project or any project that is developed on this site can get access from. So we will need a driveway somewhere along that roadway.
So my question, is the driveway the only encroachment? Do you have any other structures that encroach either into the 250-foot river setback or the 100-foot limit of disturbance buffer?
So I'll try to do a more comprehensive list. It is the driveway, the curbing and guide rail associated with the driveway.
You know, wait that fast.
Oh, apologies.
What I want to hear first are the ones that if the board were not to grant them, you basically could have no use of the property. So which are the C1, the C1 variances? And then we're gonna talk about the others that if they weren't granted, you could still develop the property. I want to know the ones that if they're not granted, you can't use the property. So the driveway is obvious.
I mean, it will be the driveway. That is the primary item.
That's the only one,
Well, hold on a second.
okay?
See if that makes sense.
Let me ask you this, you show road widening, right? You assume, I assume that you assume that the DOT is gonna require that road widening. Is that why, that's why you show it, correct?
Correct, yes.
So do you need municipal relief for that? Or do you
All that
only
work
need
will be
DOT?
completed within the right of way.
Okay, I understand that. Do you need, does the road widening, looks like to me the road widening is within the 250-foot edge. and the 100-foot limit of disturbance. And that would also go on your list, in addition to the driveway. If you don't do the road widening, the DOT is not gonna give you an access permit, correct?
Correct.
So it would be the driveway and the road widening, which your position is, board, you gotta grant them, or we can't use the property, is that correct?
Yes, I would also state two more items, one of which there is a stormwater facility associated with that driveway. Remember, the roadway, the highway is the lowest point on the site. We need to collect runoff from that driveway and send it to a stormwater facility. So we have to install a stormwater facility for that driveway, and that is located within that buffer as well.
Where, is that like, that
It is, if you're looking at the plan,
parallelogram looking thing that looks like it has rocks in it on C6?
yes.
And that's necessary to occur in that particular location?
Yes, because unless the applicant were to install some type of pump system, but like that's the lowest point on the project site. So there's no other location to send stormwater to via gravity. We have to collect it at the driveway intersection with the highway and send it to a stormwater facility immediately next to it.
That's per DOT regs?
That's just compliance with stormwater in general. We need to provide treatment for stormwater within that riparian zone and also just to meet quantity requirements as well.
Okay, so other than those three things, what are your other structures?
The farmhouse and associated structures with the farmhouse, there's a shed out there and some other ruinous features, the driveway.
Right. If the farmhouse stays, you would basically be looking for C1 relief, even though if they denied it, it wouldn't be a taking, but the argument's gonna be the house is there. But if they said, we don't care about that house, remove it, then that would remove all those variances. Right.
Yes, we just have to
Now,
make sure we.
you would need a variance actually to get in to the 100-foot no disturbance area to take the house down.
Correct.
Right, I suppose, right, it's just, I guess it's the same as the other variance that we're asking for, but a variance one way or the other, yes.
Right. But it's almost like a temporary one to take the house down, then once it's down,
Right.
there's nothing in there, right?
Disturb it to maintain or disturb it to remove,
Well,
it's the same,
permanent disturbance to
Correct.
maintain, temporary disturbance to remove.
yes,
Anything else like that? Any other
Yeah,
structure?
so I just want to note that for the farmland along the frontage, as well as the buffer along the frontage that we talked about, we are proposing to revegetate all the unused farmland on site, as well as install that buffer along the roadway frontage. That will involve disturbance, again, within those same two setbacks.
So there's three. Okay, so just to clarify, I think there's three variances for the transition buffer that are required in order to provide that access off of 173.
Okay, we got it.
Is there a outfall, that comes into contact with the 100-foot limited disturbance buffer? It's,
Correct. Yeah, it would be shown better on the color exhibit, but yes, there is a small amount of disturbance for stormwater outfall at that location. Again, if it was a matter of eliminating that, we could look into options to peel that back out of that buffer,
Oh, I see. It's shown on sheet C7.
the grading plan, yeah.
Ah. Hmm. What would you do to eliminate that?
I guess the point that I was trying to make with the exhibit and when I presented it, I just wanted to speak to some numbers that maybe put this in perspective for you. So I'm gonna say the collective buffer area, that's something that's either in the 250-foot river setback or the 100-foot limit of disturbance setback, the collective buffer area, I'll call that. The proposed disturbance associated with the driveway is 0.12 acres or about 3.3% of the overall buffer area. So the proposed disturbance for both the outfall, the stormwater basin, the driveway, collectively is only 1/3 of an acre of disturbance or less than 10% of that overall buffer area. But as part of the project, the applicant is looking to revegetate the farmland and enhance the buffer along the roadway That is 2 acres of revegetated area within that buffer area, which is currently dirt farmland today.
Where's that outflow? Where's it outflow? It goes overland to where?
There is a culvert located immediately south of that. That is one of the collection points that will send it.
Couldn't you pipe that
That is,
outflow directly into the culvert so you wouldn't have to, do a horizontal bore, so you wouldn't even have to disturb?
it would require, I mean, I don't know about horizontal bore, but there are trees and mature vegetation through there. So we were looking to maintain that. If we were to do a trench to install the pipe, we would cut down some trees at that location.
If you did a trench to install the pipe, but if you did a horizontal bore, you wouldn't have to.
It's a little bit tough with gravity utilities. It's something that I could talk to the applicant about doing, but it could be an option.
That project in Saddle River, they did a horizontal bore for a sewer line, gravity line under Route 17. Can you talk to the applicant about that?
I will have that conversation with them.
Because then you'd be left with theoretically variances for things that if the board didn't grant, you have no use of the property.
So I understand from a municipal standpoint, that's one item. There are some other DEP items to consider, which is, remember, the DEP buffer is 50 feet larger. And then I didn't touch upon it because it kind of goes into the driveway location, everything else, but there's a 300-foot DEP buffer. There is within that an inner 150-foot buffer. The DEP takes the stance that there should be 0 new disturbance within that inner 150-foot buffer, which is actually one of the main reasons that the driveway is located so far to the side.
Forget the driveway. The driveway is like a,
No, I understand. I'm just saying that by extending that pipe and doing that directional drill and connecting into that culvert, that may be within the
maybe we're not talking about the
150
same
foot
thing. I'm
buffer.
not talking about the drainage facility near the end of the driveway. I'm
No,
talking
I
about
understand.
The outflow over here.
Yes, and I'm saying that may be located within the inner 150 feet of the DEP's buffer where we cannot propose any new disturbance.
That exists there right now, you're saying?
There's a 300-foot buffer
No, no,
from the
no.
road.
Does this thing exist
It does exist, yes.
on the property right now?
The culvert, sorry, are you talking about the new outfall or the culvert that goes
No,
across the highway?
On sheet C7, it shows, that's showing a new outflow, isn't it?
That is a basin outfall that then flows over land to a culvert that is existing. on the highway.
Understood. The outflow, is that a new outflow or is that an existing outflow?
That is new.
Right. I'm saying if you need DEP approval or whether it's above ground or an underground bore, but you can eliminate needing municipal approval by doing it underground, why wouldn't you do it underground and eliminate asking the board?
Because that pipe would have to extend to the roadway. That roadway is within the critical 150-foot setback for the DEP.
Is what you're saying that you don't know that we can get it approved by DEP?
Correct.
Why
Okay,
wouldn't you
so
say that?
that's, well, that's why
Apologies.
I think the problem is we don't know that we can get it approved by DEP.
Okay.
If
Why don't
we can
you-
get
why
it
don't you-
approved,
So can you contact the DEP before next, when you come back if you see you can get anything from them, even that you can make a representation, you spoke to somebody about it.
we will investigate it. Jonathan will investigate it. I think we all know that we can't promise to get a response from DEP
You
before the
can
next
promise
year.
to ask.
We can promise to ask, and
That's
we
right.
promise to ask.
So, again, we got sidetracked a little bit. I just want to read out the numbers again. The proposed disturbance within the collective buffer areas for this project, inclusive of the driveway and the other items that we talked about, is 1/3 of an acre or less than 10% of that overall buffer area. More than 55% of that buffer area is farmland or fallow land that will be revegetated as part of this project. 12% of that area is attributed to that farmhouse area and their lawn that may or may not be revegetated as well, depending on how the board feels. And then there's about 22% of mature vegetation that exists along the roadway. So what I'm trying to outline here is that, yes, we need the driveway to provide access to the site, but the overall buffer area, we are disturbing 10% of that. But as part of the project, we're revegetating and enhancing 55% of that buffer.
Which you'd still do and a little bit more if you didn't seek some of the relief. So I understand your point. You're basically saying, board, it's not a big deal. Okay, in the overall scope of things, but you might have board members who are looking at what relief is not really necessary, and so you gotta take that back and think about it.
Okay, understood. Outside of that, I was gonna touch upon, again, either the zoning relief items or the board engineer's letter. I don't know if the board has a preference to go into each one at this time. And then in addition, for the board engineer's letter, obviously it's a little long. We can certainly go through it comment by comment, or however the board feels is appropriate.
All right, 1 second. I want to check with the court reporter. Do you need a break? You're good? Okay,
Thank you.
well,
Well, let me,
Let me do this for the summary of variances, potential variances. Do you disagree?
So-
He has a list
I was gonna touch
of
upon that.
22.
We submitted a planning memo as part of this application that listed a list of zoning relief and design waivers. The planner, your planner and your engineer also submitted summaries. They're all a little bit different from each other. I think the most comprehensive and probably closest to us is probably Mr. Goods. But he also lists a bunch of potential variances in that list, which I would go through and explain that we wouldn't be seeking relief from those.
So, first of all, your memo is dated what? Is that the April 26, 2024? This one?
Yeah, so
there was only one, I believe.
planning memo.
Yeah.
It says planning memo at the top.
Yes. Okay, so what I am most interested in having is an agreed upon list of what relief the applicant needs. So if Mr. Good's list has the most number of things on it,
Correct.
why don't we go down his? Don't read the thing, just tell me, like, do you agree with number one, which you may or may not, you know, if you don't agree or you need to talk about it, then read number one and talk about it. If you will agree with this thing, say, we agree with number 6, for
I
example.
understand.
Okay, and to take it in order, and then if he missed something that you have, or if he missed something that Kendra has, tell us about it. And if you think that he has things there that you don't need, tell us about it, or if he says discuss it, then discuss it. How's that sound?
Yeah,
The only question is, all his other comments, what do you want to do about them? Because some of them are asking for details, which you're gonna have to talk to your people about. And some of them are simple, you know, there would be your typical, if there was an approval, it would be a condition of approval.
Right, well, I would like most of them to be the condition. of
Oh, I
approval.
understand.
Right, and I know that you might have a different position on that, which is what complicates it a bit, because we might not see eye to eye, and unless we
Right.
talk about it, we might not know the answer. Would it be okay to discuss this offline prior to the next hearing?
That's a good idea. Yeah, maybe we can have a meeting offline between Bryce and Kendra and myself, you, engineer, and the planner.
Right, and for the benefit of understanding, so the public understands what we'd be discussing offline would just be,
All the comments in the
Right.
memo to see if you're gonna say, yeah, we agree, make it a condition, or if we say, no, this cannot be a condition, this is something that if you want final site plan approval, in
Right.
our opinion, you have to submit details.
and somehow we would agree to ratify that at the next hearing, what the discussion was and what we agreed upon, so that there's no.
Before the next. hearing.
Before the next hearing, my point is, we would discuss it at the hearing for the members of the public so they understand what we agreed to submit or would be a condition of approval.
So I would think then the most efficient use of time is to go over the summary of variances from Mr. Good's memo, starting on page 21 and going to page 23. And just talk about the ones that you need to talk about. If you agree with it, just say, you know, item.
Understood. So again, to your point, I'm referencing page 21 of Finelli's review letter, the summary of variances and potential variances. Item number 1 is related to permitted uses. It is the applicant's stance and has been previously discussed at the beginning of this hearing that this is a light industrial
Understood, but-
facility.
Read what he says. He wants you to discuss. If this is light industrial, explain why you need 54 loading docks and 138 truck parking spaces. That's what he wants.
That's an architectural issue that our architect would probably put, unless, John, you think it's better for you. But I would think to discuss the building and how it operates and how it's constructed, including the docks, would be an architectural issue. But I don't want to keep beating this to death, but we are going to ensure that we provide you with any level of assurance.
Put it
that
this
this
way.
is a light industrial use.
Let's say that the board, by the end of the case, after hearing all your people and all the objectors, witnesses and all that, they decide, yeah, this is a light industrial use.
Well, it is, so yeah.
My recommendation would be to impose a requirement for a deed restriction, saying that it could only be used for that, copy the definition out of the ordinance, and have a deed restriction on the prohibition of things. All that said, I think it's a legitimate question. Why are you showing 54 loading docks and 138 parking spaces?
But again, architectural issue,
Okay,
it's
so
it's
you're
the
gonna,
design of the building. The loading docks have to do with the design of the building, we could.
right, so someone needs to answer, if you're gonna say the architect, fine. So
Yeah.
the architect needs to answer
I mean,
number
I
one.
think we could all answer, is that's how the building is designed, it's designed to be more in accordance with the statute.
Designed
which
that way,
says-
you can count them.
Which,
Why is it designed that way is what he wants to know.
because your ordinance says we're not allowed to keep the materials on site, because that'll be a warehouse use.
So we need a witness to explain.
I understand that, and that's why I understand that. I
So
think
the
our
architect
architect can understand it.
Okay, so.
Is that okay, John, or do you want to get into it?
We'll give it to the architect.
All right,
Yeah.
okay.
Smart move.
I knew he would say that, that's why I asked. It's a
Architect
soft
taking number
vote.
one.
But we, so,
Can I interrupt one second?
Yeah, sure, it's your memo.
To clarify. Some of
Louder.
my question related to this is also part of the traffic engineering reports, and I'm assuming you're gonna have a testimony from a traffic engineer as well?
yes,
Okay, so I don't want to say this is an architectural issue.
No. Okay, I agree. They're gonna have a traffic engineer.
Okay.
What I wanna know is, Bryce, what you say is, listen, there's a potential use variance unless they can explain that the 54 loading docks and 138 truck parking spaces are not gonna convert what's a light industrial use into a warehouse. Okay,
So-
they're saying the architect's gonna address that. You'll also have the traffic engineer address the traffic engineer.
I just want to clarify,
Yes.
there will be testimony from a traffic engineer.
yes, absolutely, Mr. Gill, we will address it to the board's satisfaction before we conclude our presentation, I promise you that, okay? This is not a D1 scenario, this is not a warehouse, this is a light industrial use. We will provide testimony to your satisfaction to explain the need for the loading docks and the spaces. Okay,
Item 2.
we don't need to argue about it any further.
I believe item 2 has already been addressed. It was about the potential use of the farmhouse.
So, right, Bryce wrote D2, he meant the D1 variance, but if you're already accepting a condition saying that can't be an office. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm gonna check with Kendra, right, we're gonna cross off number 2, once you've said that building is not being used as an office.
Item number 3, I believe, falls into the same category with the exception of the bulk requirements, depending on if the farmhouse is gonna be removed or not. It's not really, it's just like.
Yeah,
a
that one's
general
still on the table for now, it depends on, I mean, I don't really know what to. It might be too early in the case to stroke hold the board on whether, what they want done with that house, because on this one, if it were eliminated, that takes more variances right out. Now, the applicant's already indicated that's their preference, so I guess the question to the board is, again, without prejudging what you're gonna do on the application itself. Assuming that this thing is in fact light industrial use, and assuming that you guys were to grant it. Does anyone have a problem with the applicant wanting to take that house down? Anyone have a problem with that?
I'm not really ready to make a decision like that.
Yeah, I would rather see what their actual landscape is gonna look like, how much of the house is gonna be visible, how much of an impact it's gonna have on the overall view of that area. You know, how much of the building behind is gonna be blocked, it might be more presentable for that stretch of the state.
I just think it's too early in the game.
Okay, but the bottom line is they agreed that it's not gonna be an office, so that
Right.
takes out number 2, but number 3 remains in play for now. There's nothing really we can talk about it for now.
Correct. Number 4, it's the same thing. It's the front yard setback for that same structure.
Yeah.
Number 5 is just a point of clarification for the board's engineer.
So read this one,
Yes,
read this one.
okay. Section 16, subsection A, 6.6G floor area ratio. Depending on the clarification of a light industrial building size, a variance from this requirement may be required. So on our site plans, we indicate the building size to be 885 feet by 210 feet. The architect's plans indicate 886 feet by 210 feet. So it's a discrepancy of 1 foot. For the record, the building size is 885 feet by 210 feet.
So the architect was wrong.
We had to slim back the size of the building to comply with the floor area ratio.
Ah, okay. So the architectural plans are gonna be revised accordingly?
Yes,
Yes, there is no floor area ratio variance sought as part of this application.
Right. If the architect's plans are revised, correct?
Correct. Yes.
number 6, again, related to the farmhouse. It's about whether or not parking is allowed within that front yard setback. You know, at this point, we'll leave it open, but it
Number
could
3,
potentially-
4, and 6.
Yes. Number 7, the applicant will comply. We've taken a look at this. The requirement was to have 10 feet of landscaping between the building and the sidewalk in front. The applicant was originally proposing 5.5 feet. We took a look at the plans. We believe we can make it work with 10 feet. Obviously, similar to the architect's plans, we would submit revised site plans showing that compliance, but the applicant can remove or is no longer requesting that variance.
Number 7.
That's number 7.
That's number 7. Number 8.
Number 8 is about the driveway location in relation to the intersection with Bloomsbury Road to the east. I touched upon this a little bit. This variance will still be sought. I can explain why the driveway is there, or I can simply say that we're seeking that variance.
Right, for now, you're seeking the variance.
Okay.
Because I assume, well, I don't know. Who are you gonna have, who's gonna testify in support of the C variances? The engineer, the planner, or the engineer and the planner?
The engineer will provide the testimonial foundation for the planner to then discuss the criteria
And
of
explain,
variances.
explain then why
Sure.
variance is required.
As I mentioned before, there's a 300-foot NJDEP stream buffer. And within that buffer, there is an inner 150-foot buffer where no new disturbance can be proposed. That inner 150-foot buffer takes up approximately 2/3 of the site frontage, running to the left of the page or the west, leaving only 1/3 approximately of the site frontage available to connect a driveway into. The applicant is proposing that driveway in that location. They have worked with the DOT as well as part of our application, because there are some road widening and striping improvements to build a turn bay there. So there's a certain length that turn bay needs to be, which is what is dictating the general location of that driveway.
Where is it? Is it within 150 feet of an intersection?
Bloomsbury Road. So if you look at the bottom left corner of the page, you'll see where Route 173 bends in
Bottom right-hand
Bloomsbury.
corner.
I apologize, bottom right-hand corner.
Oh, I see.
So just to clarify, the testimony is that the only place that we can get an approved site access driveway by DOT and DEP is at the general location that we're proposing it.
Correct.
How many feet away from the intersection is the driveway now proposed? And the closest point?
And while you're looking this up, this is subject to DOT review and approval as well.
Correct, yes.
Pender's memo says on page item 5, going on to page 5, says it's 51.9 feet from the intersection. Let's assume it's 51.9 feet from the intersection. So explain why you can't move it another 100 feet to the west.
Correct. I'm also looking at our planning memo, which also indicates 51.9 feet. And again, the applicant can look at the exact driveway location. There might be wiggle room to move it a little bit further from the intersection, but not.
Will the in your opinion, will the DEP approve it if you moved it?
If it is
150 feet
within the
away?
150-foot buffer, they will not approve it.
It is placed and John, correct me if I'm wrong. The location we put the driveway access in is strictly because that's the only place we believe, and speaking with the the engineer's experience, the DOT and the DEP, that's the only place it will be approved for access to our site. Is that correct?
Correct.
There would be no other reason for the applicant to put it in that location, other than that's the only place it could be located.
Spirit, what would happen if the DEP didn't approve that? Then they
They
would,
approve, they approve, then they would
they would take the property.
they would take the room. Well, we would have that fight. I'm sure they wouldn't do it willingly.
Okay,
And then as a follow-up clarification, if New Jersey DOT comes back and says they don't need that widening, to be that long, or don't need that widening, that would afford you the opportunity to move the driveway.
Yes.
Because the widening is what's really dictating where the driveway is at, because the widening has to be outside the DEP.
is that correct?
That is correct. Yes.
Mr. Drill, then I think maybe if we are summarizing this at the end, so we don't both forget, we would put it maybe not closer than 51.9. To the, in case the DOT does allow that, because we will push for some additional buffer from the intersection. So,
Good idea. Yeah.
right, so I think that would be sort of a good balance, so that we don't have to come back and ask, oh, we've already improved the situation, we don't have to ask for approval again if we were to be granted an approval.
And that's the second time he said, good idea. You're doing good.
Well, I better stop
You wanna
talking.
do
I
that?
usually don't have many in a night, so I better limit what I say next.
And number 9,
Number 9 is related to the incorporation of sidewalks within the parking lot for the light industrial facility. The applicant is not proposing sidewalks within the curb islands throughout the parking lot. They believe because of the type of facility, the staff are just gonna walk and beeline it, so to speak, to the entrances, and those sidewalks aren't required. The applicant is also using those islands to just incorporate more landscaping rather than sidewalk and more impervious into the site.
I'm gonna ask Kendra because she deals with issues like this. What is your opinion on this?
So I don't think that the layout actually allows for what the ordinance requires between the park batteries, the batteries of the parking areas. And it's typically required, normally you see it in retail shopping centers and that type of thing, where you have a lot of traffic back and forth. But the way that this parking lot is laid out, it's actually not, there isn't really a way you can do it.
So you're thinking that it's just impractical to require it because it's not really needed in this particular case?
Yeah, I'm not gonna testify for them, but yes,
Yeah.
that would be the case.
Bryce, what do you think?
I would concur with Kendra's assessment of the situation. I mean, I think they still need the variance because they're doing it.
That's where we need the variance, no question, I'm just, okay.
You got that?
The next two items, items number 10 and number 11 are again related to the farmhouse, one of which is the width of the driveway. In the zone, it's required a 30-foot wide driveway. It's a farmhouse, the driveway is 12 feet wide today. And then additionally, there's a requirement number 11 for overhead or for all utilities to be underground. The farmhouse is served by an overhead power line today.
So far, just counting, we're up to 5 variances that will be eliminated if that farmhouse is eliminated. Go to number 12.
And just to clarify, if there was 3 options on the use of that building, one of them was storage.
Yeah,
So if it is,
no, I said, if it was eliminated, if the building was eliminated, right, you'd eliminate 5 variances in counting. If the building remains, they already agreed they're not using it for an office. It could either be vacant or it could be storage, and those are permitted.
right, but access to a storage would still need to be considered. That's all I'm saying on these 2 variances
Oh.
here. If you keep it as storage, some of these variances will still be required because they need to access that storage.
Aren't you showing a sidewalk back in that building?
May I just clarify that the applicant says we won't use it for storage. It's either vacant or we can remove it. If we're allowed to remove it, it'll be gone. If we are not allowed to remove it, we'll keep it vacant. Like I said, it has no utility to the site. So that, I think,
The board's
eliminates
gonna
one.
decide, but it might not be a good idea just to keep it vacant, but whatever, that's up
Well, we
to the
would-
board.
We would
right?
be obviously
Yeah.
obligated to maintain it to some level, but I agree with you.
Okay, what about item 12?
12, 13, and 14 are all related to the buffer variances that we discussed. In particular, items number 12 and number 13 are related to the driveway specifically. There are other areas of disturbance as well, but we will need those two variances for the driveway. And then the same thing again for number 14, because we're proposing disturbance, even if it's just for the
Right,
driveway.
that was like the temporary disturbance to install your proposed development.
Well, there would be permanent improvements left behind, but yes.
Because
The drive,
number 14 says clearing and grading are proposed. The clearing and grading is to allow permanent installation, right?
Yes.
so the clearing would be permanent. Well, so
The
would the
grading's
grade,
permanent.
right,
too,
so would the grade.
But you need it. Well. Clearing and grading aren't structures,
Right,
so it's not like the structures are permanently going to be within the 150-foot buffer. You need a temporary buffer variance to do the grading and clearing. Does that include, when you grade and clear, are you putting structures on top of that?
We'll put the driveway on top asphalt, yes.
But isn't that, okay, I thought that was included with it, all right, whatever.
Yeah, and the limited disturbance buffer, truthfully, that we've read it 100 times over, the language is unclear. We took it to be if you're doing any type of disturbance,
That's
it's
correct.
really.
That's correct,
Okay,
that's
Exactly.
correct, right, that's what it means. Okay, I get it, we're back to which, which structures are necessary and which are not necessary, but you would like to have them. Okay, 15,
15 goes back to the farmhouse, considering it an accessory structure in the front yard.
Can we talk about that for a second? Accessory, so that's 6S2, correct?
Yes,
6S2 talks about accessory structures, truck access drives and parking areas that are not permitted to be in the yard that's abutting a residential zone. So you have more than that. You have truck access drive, you have 255 parking spaces in that yard that's abutting the residential zone, correct?
to be clear, I'm looking at it, it's not the yard, I'm looking at it as within the buffer area.
Well, if you read, we could read it.
yeah, why don't you read it for them?
Here, give me 1 second to flip to my section if you don't mind, so I can read along.
Okay. We'll have you read it.
Kendra was doing pretty good at reading.
Okay, 6S2, I'm reading from the ordinance, accessory structures, outdoor storage, loading docks, refuse disposal, truck access drive, and parking areas shall not be located within a yard on the site that is abutting a residential zone or use without an intervening building. That's the case,
Yes, so you would take that the truck access drive being the driveway
correct,
in there, so it would
and the
be,
parking areas.
The
yes.
parking area.
So that really goes to one of the main, this is definitely one of the biggest variances, in my opinion. The way that the site is laid out has nothing to do with the access, but the way the site is laid out is that you have these access drives in areas where they're not supposed to be. So I know your planner is gonna come in and testify as to that, but we really haven't heard a lot of testimony as to why this is laid out the way it's laid out.
Do you want to discuss that, or do you want to have? our
I mean,
traffic
I can
discuss it?
give you the general, like, we're gonna have a traffic expert who will talk about it, but as I mentioned in the beginning, there is an outer circulation lane that goes around the building extents and the inner customer parking
Right,
lot.
why can't you move the building? That's what she's saying. Why does the building have to be where it's located? When you have the building here, then the parking and the other things that are the
She's-
accessory structure.
I understand it to be anything in front of in front of the light industrial building
Correct.
is a variance. It doesn't matter how far back it's set.
Right, so the idea behind nothing, the idea behind not having truck access or parking facing a residential zone is to limit the amount of disturbance to that residential zone. So the thought process when this ordinance was put together
Put
is
stuff in the back.
you put it behind that intervening building because that creates the buffer, part of the buffer. So so part of, I think, the testimony needs to be, why is this a better, because your planner's gonna say it, it was gonna have to testify to it, why is this a better site layout and you're asking for the variance, why does this make sense more than what you would, put together to comply with the ordinance?
And I guess the question is then, the way to eliminate it, John, is if you were to take that building, bring it much closer to the road, and then have all the related parking behind it, would that be the only?
And the truck access.
Yes.
So the drive aisle and the parking would have to get flip-flopped. And we'll have a traffic engineer talk about the circulation in more detail, but you can imagine we have the loading activities in the rear of the building, so we
Right.
can't simultaneously have the loading and the staff parking and other circulation all behind the building.
Why? You have, there's a bunch of, look at the area you have up here. You could move a bunch of stuff in there.
Typically, with an industrial facility, you always want to separate the staff and visitor activity area from where you would have your truck traffic. You wouldn't want to commingle with people parking their car, walking through a truck courtyard and loading dock to get into the
And
building.
you don't think there's a better layout for the building to accomplish that? Does it have to be a long linear building like that to accomplish what you're suggesting?
In
The-
other words, why can't you flip the building like that? If you flip the building like that, then the only part that would be in the front yard would be the side of the building.
What we can do, and what I'm hearing from John is that the building layouts are designed like this intentionally to avoid any safety issues.
We're saying,
Well,
if
I
you
know.
flip the building.
I understand.
You could keep, see this little back part here?
Yes,
If you flipped it that way, you could limit that to the only, that would make it a minor variance instead of a major variance.
okay. You got me with the minor versus major, so I lost my train of thought for a second. But what I was gonna suggest is we will explore alternative orientations of the building. I know that we did this already, and that was what we came up with as the best, safest, most efficient design, right? I'm sure everyone can appreciate, we didn't just draw a rectangle once and say, hey, that looks great, let's go with that. There was a lot of thought that went into this. What we can do before the next hearing is we can explore our prior iterations and some of the alternatives that you just suggested. And if there is a better design, I think it's unlikely, but if there is one, we will come back and see what we can do to modify it. If there is not, we will have a better explanation as to the reasons why this is the best alternative for the site.
It might very well be that this is the best alternative that the applicant wants for the site. Understood. What Kendra's saying is there might be a better alternative for the township for the site. If the building was flipped like that, you wouldn't necessarily have to lose any of the square footage. And it would place a lot of the activity further away from the residential area across there.
Right, I don't want to testify, and I told you we'll get you the answers to those. I think the design, we have the ability to make a buffer, an adequate buffer where it is now, but we'll clarify that for the next hearing rather than belabor it. We understand the concern and the issue.
Okay, and just a comment with regards to if you decide to continue with this layout and for and I think I put it in my report, my recommendation, my strong recommendation is that you have clear perspectives from Route 173 looking into this property. So we understand what the impact is of the truck access drives, the parking areas, from a visual, from the view shed, from not only the residents, but also from Route 173. This is, in my opinion, one of the main, and I'll go back to what you said, it's a major variance. It's not one that's needed for access to the property. It's not de minimis, I think, that the council had indicated ahead of time. This one is a major variance that will impact the passerbys as well as the residents. And that's the reason why the ordinance was put together, was to prevent that.
I understand. It sounds like the applicants were gonna get together and discuss potential options, but I just wanted to outline one point, just so it's clear. If we're not allowed to have any drive aisles between the building and the front
I'm not
yard,
saying that. She's not saying you're not allowed to have any. She's saying that the way it's laid out, you have a maximum amount. Perhaps if you could turn the
I
building,
understand.
you could have lesser of an amount.
I understand
She's understanding that some variance would probably have to be granted. It's the extent of the variance that she's talking about.
okay.
Am I right?
You're correct.
So I understand. We're going to explore if there's any way to minimize
Right,
Just minimize
yeah,
the
this
amount
one,
of,
this one can't be eliminated.
that's what I think, but I wanna make sure I'm understanding what Ms. Lely says is, we'll investigate whether we can minimize
He
it.
wants to move this from a really large variance to what you said in the beginning, of the minimis.
Right,
This is not the minimis as it stands now. That's
I
your
understand,
point.
I understand your perspective, and I appreciate the perspective.
Number 16. We already discussed this. This is 40 feet versus 50 feet offline. You gotta figure out if, who's right. 17.
This is about having the sign located in, I believe what's called the frontage buffer, but I'll take that to be the landscape buffer.
Can you look at what, it's ordinance section 16-4.14, which is a buffer section, D1D. Well, 16-4.14 D point, oh, maybe it's an L dash D, not a one. Bryce, what is that? Can you read?
16-4.14
And the subsection D. And what Bryce says is the monument sign is located within the frontage buffer and potentially will require a variance. Ordinance is, can you read the ordinance to everybody?
Frontage buffer plantings shall not be required along internal access roads. Is that the right one?
That's what he cites. Bryce, can you look at this thing?
I'm looking right now. Give me 1 second, please.
Building structures, accessory structures, parking, driveways, loading areas, or storage of materials shall be permitted in the frontage buffer. Driveways, utilities, fences. Oh, I'm so sorry. No building structures. Accessory structures, parking, driveways, loading areas, storage materials
Shall
shall
be permitted in the frontage.
buffer.
The only things that are permitted are driveways, utilities, fences, and security structures.
So we're, the question by potentially is whether or not a sign is an accessory structure.
Well, it is. A sign's an accessory structure. He's saying will potentially require variance, maybe. Maybe
sign-
it can it be moved, but,
No.
well, they would say, if we move it any further, it's not gonna serve its purpose. That's why we need a variance. They might say, so where, are you saying that under the ordinance, you couldn't have a ground sign anywhere in the frontage buffer? So how deep is the frontage buffer? 50 feet. How many feet from the front property line is the sign?
It is set to the required sign setback in the signage ordinance. Give me one moment.
Bryce is correct. Bryce, you're correct about this. It needs a variance. We just have to see.
You're right.
Well, the other aspect of it. is
25
it's
feet currently.
Within 2 buffers. It's within the frontage buffer, which is the 50 foot, but it's also within the 250 foot buffer as well. We didn't discuss it when we were discussing the 250 foot buffer, because we were only discussing the items that would prevent the project from going forward. The sign location doesn't prevent the project going forward. So this sign is in 2 buffers.
This is my suggestion. We go to 17, we cross out the word potentially. It requires a variance. You're gonna put on testimony, I presume, that if you complied with the 50-foot buffer, you wouldn't see it from the street. So it's a safety thing.
We absolutely need the variance. We need to have the sign, I think,
Okay.
well, I feel confident that everyone would agree it's a
Yeah,
safety
yeah.
issue.
So we're gonna cross out potentially. It
Doesn't help.
Needs a variance.
Right.
18.
18 is the 250-foot buffer that was referenced already to have the driveway, the sign, stormwater improvements, the existing farmhouse facilities, et cetera.
And again, not to beat a dead horse, you're gonna look at some of this stuff and see if you can eliminate some of it and only keep in there the stuff you really need. 19 is the bicycle parking. You said that, if more
There
required.
was
you're
a
gonna do
parking
it.
ratio that we used just on passenger parking spaces. The board engineer included the trailer parking spaces as well, if we can provide it.
The ordinance does not say passenger vehicle, it says parking spaces, and they identify.
Listen, here's the bottom line. You wanna comply or do you wanna apply for a variance?
For the parking spaces?
Bicycle.
We're gonna add the
Bicycle
11
spaces?
extra bicycle spaces.
Well, we can add them. I mean, we have no problem adding spaces. I mean, let me just back up and give
It's
our.
not space, it's gonna be racks.
Right, I'm sorry. Let me give a little bit of the rationale behind some of the planning considerations. we don't want to overburden the site with things that are unnecessary,
Yeah.
just to say we put them in.
Right.
Right, so sometimes,
Right, so
Even
even
with
if you
parking-
say on this one, if the board wants us to comply, we will, but we think it'd be a better idea to ask for a variance.
absolutely, that's our position,
Okay.
right?
There you go.
But we don't want to do so at the risk of putting an impediment to the board of saying, well, we can't live with
You're
that.
not putting an impediment, if you're telling them that they want you to comply, you'll comply.
Okay, as
We
long as,
think it's a
yeah,
better idea to ask for the variance.
that is exactly our position. I appreciate you articulating it. Some boards don't appreciate that, but if this board does, then that's the way we'd like to proceed. And like I said, I appreciate it.
Number 20,
Number 20, I touched upon, but it's the interior lot landscaping, 8% requirement. The
right, but he said the
applicant,
variance potentially required. Is a variance required or not?
it is not. We are proposing 10%. We will highlight
Okay.
those areas. for the
Kendra
board.
agrees.
All
So,
we were looking for was clarification on the plan, because
Yeah.
it wasn't
okay,
clear to us that the 10% was there without us measuring every little spot in the plan. So if you could just
Kendra, you're satisfied?
revise the plan to
And just
simply
so the board knows, Bryce is obviously the board's engineering expert and a township engineer. Kendra is not only the board's planning expert. She's also a landscape architect. She's also the board's landscape architectural expert. She said is satisfied, so I'm crossing out number 20. Number 21.
Number 21 is in regards to the requirement to install sidewalk and trees along the state highway. It is under DOT jurisdiction. We have previously submitted to them, as I testified to. They do not want that road curbed. They do not want sidewalks.
So you need a variance from the board, but what you're saying is it's really up to the DOT.
Correct.
Okay, number 22. And that's the average proposed illumination.
Correct.
It's greater, it's greater than 0.5, you said it's 0. What?
9.6.
Okay,
And you're gonna check out the height of the tank.
all right, add that to the list. Height of the tank. Now, Kendra, do you have anything in your report that Bryce did not have in his? And then I'm gonna ask you guys if you had anything in your April 24, 2024 letter that Bryce didn't have in his.
No, I don't know.
Okay, you got everything from
Other
Kendra.
than the one we just talked about.
Yeah.
Driveway.
Yeah, the only thing I would
got it.
state is that there's discrepancies, we'll call it, on what is being considered a design waiver and what is being considered a variance. The board planner's letter indicates more design waivers than variances. So it's just putting that.
We'll have to figure that out, but the relief.
Yeah.
Sought.
Correct, there are, and then the two design waivers related to the driveway radii that's outlined there. I don't know if you want to go through that. It's two more items at the
Okay.
bottom of page 23.
Oh, yes, I do. Thank you.
So the first one, I spoke to, but it's the existing driveway for the farmhouse, required, turning radius is 25 feet.
Again, if
and
the farmhouse
existing
is
driveway.
eliminated, that goes away.
Correct,
How about number 2, the width of the driveway to the light industrial facility is greater than 35 feet, therefore a waiver is required.
correct, yes. The driveway being proposed is, wider than what is called out, maximum in the ordinance. It is required for truck turning movements.
And
It is
the
also a
traffic
driveway.
engineer is
under-
gonna address that, correct?
Correct.
Do you have anything else, or is he ready to be questioned?
For tonight, he's ready to answer some questions. John, unless you think you have something else you'd like to cover.
I'm ready.
With the understanding that
He's coming back,
he's gonna come back as just, if there's any changes, we'll have to discuss what those changes are. If there's any cleanup items,
because
We'll
we're
clean up
not gonna get to public questions tonight. We're gonna, it sounds like going with your plan, we're gonna have questions from the 2 attorneys representing entities. And then my guess is we're gonna be at 10:30. And then we're gonna continue to April, so everyone in the public in this room and in the other room. When we end up moving to the high school, hopefully, everyone will be asking questions. At the middle school, sorry, everyone will be asking questions at that point.
I missed the first part. We said we're not gonna have, just,
No, we're going with the 2 attorneys are gonna
Got it.
start up their questions. So who wants to go first? Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. My grandmother's a 4'0" Greek lady, so she taught me how to yell.
Okay.
Remind me
For
of
the
your name
record,
again.
you are who and you represent who?
Yes, my name is Ted Carroll. I'm an attorney with the Gruenberg Law Office. And we've been appointed special counsel by the Borough of Bloomsbury And if I could just give a brief statement as to what our position is with respect to this application.
Sure.
Just to keep a long story short, I know it's a late night. I just wanted to reiterate much of the points that were brought up by Mr. Drill at the beginning of this meeting. The borough's position on this application is very clear in that there is still a jurisdictional threshold issue as to whether or not a D1 use variance is required. Just to give a brief analogy, if I were to, submit an application for an office use that's permitted in the zone, but the plans that are indicated on my submission include a reptile exhibit, include a tiger cage. Well, at what point is the board going to decide, okay, well, maybe this is a zoo instead of what I'm proposing as an office use? In a very similar way, just on the face of the application itself, there's a lot of questions that are unanswered, and I understand that there's going to be planner testimony with regard to the specifications of the plans itself, but I would like to go back to what the applicant's counsel had spoken to as to the purpose of the ROM zone as articulated in section 16-18A.1. To make a long story short, to quote from the purpose of the zone, it is the primary intent of this zone to encourage high quality research and office park development.
Slow it down for her.
Yes. It is the primary intent of this zone to encourage high quality research and office park development. Uses which require large amounts of truck activity are discouraged. And I wanted to emphasize that point there.
And
The applicant,
You're reading, that's on page 2 of your March or Mr. Gruenberg's March 5th letter. He cites the purpose section and he bolded and underlined that last part that you just read.
that is correct. That is correct. Also found in Mr. Gruenberg's letter dated March 5th, and that was submitted to the board and the board secretary.
And to the applicant's attorney.
And to the applicant's attorney as well. The uses that are prohibited in the ROM zone include the following as set forth in section 16-18A.5. Any use other than those listed as permitted, conditional or accessory uses, warehouse or major distribution facility or large fulfillment distribution center or last mile fulfillment center and flex space, and trucking companies or truck stops. Now, I understand again that there's going to be testimony from the applicant's planner. I just want to make it very clear that this is the Borough of Bloomsbury's position, that there is this jurisdictional issue and it remains as such. And as you indicated, Mr. Drill, in the beginning of this whole ordeal, that if the board were to make a finding that a D1 use variance is required in this situation, the applicant would have to go back from square one, meaning new notice of hearing and going through the whole rigmarole of expert testimony.
Correct, and when I spoke with both Mr. Gruenberg and the applicant's attorney ahead of time, I was trying to figure out if there's some way that the board could make this, preliminary threshold decision, so you wouldn't have to go through the whole thing, but both of the attorneys said, and then I ended up having to agree with them. How do you do that without hearing the evidence of what the proposed use is?
Right, well, I suppose, and again, I only comment, I'm not interrupting you, just that you made a statement, and I would like to briefly respond, is that it says that it discourages large truck activities discouraged. We're seeking a light industrial use that's permitted in the zone.
We forget.
So
We know.
we can just say, how do we decide?
We know you're.
How did the board decide? The board can say, as a condition of any approval, we're not allowed to have a warehouse or any use that's not permitted in the zone. And we would agree to that. I mean, it's a very simple issue, in my opinion.
Are you guys, Bloomsbury gonna be presenting a planning expert?
I will have to confer with the borough to see if that is their objective.
Okay, now do you have questions for this witness?
I do,
Okay.
yes. It's just to clarify for the record, it's my understanding that there are no proposed tenants at this time.
Correct.
Yes. However, your project description states that anywhere from 1 to 4 tenants would occupy the space.
Like, you can't say, you have to say yes or
Yes.
no.
How would the tenants share that space?
Depends on the tenants and the operations that they need. The idea is that maybe a tenant comes in and they don't need the entirety of that space. It could be, division wall can be put up and then the rest of the space could be used for another tenant. It doesn't have to be a single tenant, it could be multiple, up to 4.
Is a division wall easily constructed?
Well, just real quick, I believe this is probably a question that's better suited for our architect. Once
Listen,
discuss-
whoa. You have a basis of an objection for him to ask this
Yes.
witness, what's the basis of, having an objection from an engineer who just talked about site, talking
He's
about.
asking about the mising walls on the interior of the building, and he didn't testify to anything about the way the construction of the interior of the building, but the architect will be discussing that, and it's better suited for the architect. That's my objection.
Okay, let me ask you something. Do you know anything about constructing interior division walls in a building?
I do not.
Okay, my recommendation is that, the objection is well stated. You should sustain it.
Sustain it.
All right, go to the next question.
You clarified that there will be no office use on the existing residential structure, correct?
Correct.
Will there be office space within the warehouse building itself?
Again, this will be maybe a better question for the architect. It is my understanding that there will be some office space inside the main building, yes.
And where will the majority of activity take place on site?
The majority of activity will be performed within the building itself.
So in addition, there's also going to be activity in the northern area of the site.
Yes, there are loading facilities, loading docks in the northern end of the site where vehicles can back up to the building and product can either be unloaded or loaded in to those trucks.
And because there's no current tenant lined up, you can't clarify what exact operations will take place on site, correct?
I cannot.
So you can't clarify whether or not there will be any storage of materials.
No, per the town ordinance, there's no outdoor storage permitted and the applicant is going to agree to that.
But will there be storage inside of the building?
Again, it depends on the tenant and their operations. I believe per code, they're allowed to have up to 30% of the square footage within the building allotted to storage.
And what is the proposed height of this main warehouse building?
It is up to 45 feet. The architectural plans currently show 44. Again, it will ultimately depend on the tenant requirements, but the building can be up to 45 feet per code.
Have you sought input from the township's emergency services as to their ability to scale the roof and get on top of the roof?
We have been in discussions with the municipal fire chief regarding things like fire apparatus. At the earlier stage of the projects, this is months ago, we did reach out requesting input on fire hydrant review and the typical things that you would see for fire suppression, yes.
And with regard to the circulation, this may or may not be a question for the traffic expert. Will there be any kind of emergency access drive in addition to the circulation plan as shown?
No, the traffic engineer will testify more to the site circulation, but the intent is for the fire apparatus or any emergency vehicles to enter through the one driveway. And then they can loop around the main perimeter drive aisle, but smaller emergency vehicles can circulate within the inner parking lot area as well.
Are there any fire hydrants proposed for this site?
I believe so, yes. I do not know the exact quantity off the top of my head.
And you can't clarify what the distance between each fire hydrant is and whether or not you've sought approval from emergency services?
Again, we have reached out to the municipal fire chief about this.
Yeah, are fire hydrants shown on the plan anywhere?
Yeah, there's a few shown around the site. Again, I'm looking at sheet C9, the utility plan. An instance of a fire hydrant location. If you look at the middle of the
Guys,
building.
quiet down because the people in the other room can't hear if you guys are talking. Okay, sheet C9.
Sheet C9, look at the building, look at the front of the building. In the center, you'll see a water line that loops around the building. Right next to that or in front of it, you'll see a drive aisle. There'll be a call out for a fire hydrant and gate valve. That is one of the hydrants that is located on site. I do believe there are several more. I have an 11 by 17 copy in front of me. It's gonna take me a moment to see it. There are a few fire hydrants proposed throughout the site.
All right, so if next month, just have something to show where they are.
Yes.
Okay. Who would be in charge of maintaining the property after a tenant has been chosen?
I would defer to the applicant. I imagine there would be property or building management.
I can hear you.
Can't hear you.
I would have to talk to the applicant. I imagine there would be some sort of property management, or if the tenant took the entire building, maybe they're responsible for management. It
Put it this
depends.
way, add that to the list of things to come back with.
I can investigate. I don't know that we'll have an answer. That would be something that tenant review, during the tenant review period, we would determine who's responsible for. If the tenant takes triple net lease and is responsible for the entire site, they, as part of their lease, would be obligated to do certain maintenance items. Obviously, it's ultimately the property owner's responsibility to make sure they comply with the code, right? And they will do that. But as far as a day-to-day operational maintenance as to snow plow or things of that nature, that would be built into a tenant lease and negotiated with the tenant or tenants. But again, it all falls on the property owner ultimately, because if we don't comply with the township ordinances, we'll be issued a violation and we will have to rectify it or force the tenant to rectify it or some combination thereof. I'm not really sure that it's relevant, but it'll be done, and we can stipulate that it'll be done by the property owner if a tenant is not obligated to do it.
What is this? On the stormwater stuff, Bryce, did they submit, I thought I saw in the package, a maintenance manual for the stormwater? Did I see it, or is it another application?
There was a submission of a stormwater operations maintenance manual.
Who's responsible under that document to maintain the stormwater stuff? Who's responsible?
Currently, so in the manual, it's currently listed as the applicant. That entity can change depending on who's going to ultimately take over, if it's not going to be the applicant maintaining.
That's why it's relevant,
That's
but
a separate question.
no, it's not.
Well, that wasn't the question I understood, so that's a different question, and I think John answered that, but I apologize if I overlooked that, or I wasn't clear on the question, but when I answered the question, I answered it differently than stormwater maintenance.
Why don't you ask that question again to him?
Sure, who would be responsible for maintenance on site?
That sounds like to me, maintenance on site means all the site improvements.
Okay, there's a stormwater maintenance manual. John, maybe you can go through the stormwater maintenance manual.
What about if the pavement breaks up in the parking lot?
That was the answer I gave. There's a stormwater maintenance manual that we're required to follow. That's a recorded document that's approved by the DEP. And that is a little bit separate than what I understood the question to be.
But,
And I think the answer is a little different as well.
so currently in the O&M manual, the applicant's responsible. Is that correct?
And just to be clear, that document is only for the management and maintenance of the stormwater
Yeah.
facilities.
And you're saying that could change if too, if there was a net lease with one tenant?
I believe we could obligate the tenant to make those changes, but again, ultimately it'd be on the property owner if there was a failure or a lack of diligence in maintaining it. And I think that's
Just
just,
gonna look at that.
it's a standard.
Okay.
Right, I'm not trying to be elusive if it's coming across that way.
Yeah, it's coming across that way.
Well, okay, that's why,
That's-
I could tell by your response that you're picking up on that. That's not my point. The point is, I think it's premature to determine the exact responsibility. I don't know the purpose of the question. If it's who's gonna be doing the day-to-day operations,
He didn't ask about day-to-day operations.
well, maintenance, it's very overly broad. I could have objected. Fine, I object to the question. It's overly broad, and I was trying to answer, so.
My advice is overrule that objection. And to bring back an answer at the next month, you still might not know, maybe you have something better, but bring something back. He's gonna ask again if you don't.
No,
That's the next question.
Can you talk to me a little bit about the security measures that are in place? Will any given tenant be granted access to the property at any given hour?
Again, it's gonna depend on who the ultimate tenant is, what their preferences are for security features. There was a discussion on security lighting that we had, and as we discussed, we're gonna work with the police department to determine the amount of security lighting that will be used on site. Any additional security measures will be tenant specific.
Are there a limitation on the hours of operation, or is this a 24/7?
I believe it was noted in Mr. Good's letter. I wanted to say it's something like 6 AM to 10 PM.
What's the ordinance section that says that? Because is there a gate anywhere in the driveway so that if the ordinance limits the hours of operation, that there's a gate so that trucks and vehicles can't go on the site outside those hours?
There is no gate currently proposed, no.
Can you find where in, right, do you know where in your memo?
Yeah, it's, number 28 on page 8. The ROM zone has a restriction, that's section 16-4.18. That operation is 6 AM to 10 PM with all outdoor uses closed from 10 PM to 6 AM.
Okay, so my suggestion is you gotta add a gate. Why? So that a vehicle can't come on the site after 10 PM before 6 AM.
Is that a requirement of any other property in the town of that they have
It's in the
a,
ordinance.
that they have a gate?
Well, how are you gonna keep trucks out from 10 PM to 6 AM? That would be a condition.
What would be conditioned? We could do that from
You
an
think-
operational
Do you
standpoint.
think that would be an unreasonable condition if the ordinance?
I haven't thought, I'm hearing it for the first time. I don't know.
Okay, think about that.
Yes,
Okay.
we'll talk about that.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll look into it. And we'll come back with a response on that too, but I'll put it in my notes, absolutely.
All right.
Bryce, what number item in your memo is that?
Item number 28.
Okay,
All right, my next series of questions has to do with the noise generated from the proposed use. Your environmental impact outline dated September 18th, 2024, on page 10 states the impacts of noise pollution are minimal. Isn't that correct?
That's correct. The use and as required by code, all activity for the light industrial facility will be conducted inside the building.
Understood. You are a licensed engineer for the state of New Jersey, correct?
Correct.
Do you have any expertise with regard to acoustical engineering?
I'm not an acoustics engineer, certainly have not presented myself to the board as an acoustics expert. The applicant, and I've talked with them, they will comply with all noise statutes that are required in terms of sound level leaving the property. As outlined, I believe there's state statute regarding the number of decibel levels for sound.
so there's a state regulation. It's NJSA
Yeah, I don't remember.
7:29-1, I believe. So it's your testimony that's the state noise code.
Yes.
So how is that, if you're testifying it's gonna be complied with, how do you know? How do you,
Has there been any acoustical study performed for the subject property?
There has not. It's an undeveloped property.
But you're aware that there are residential properties within 200 feet, correct?
I understand, yes.
But you can't say with any certainty what the impact from an acoustical engineering perspective would have on those properties that are within 200 feet, correct?
I cannot. I will also say, again, this could be something that could be a post-approval item in terms of performing an acoustic study, no different than what has already been identified by Mr. Good in terms of a post-construction lighting survey. The applicant's certainly willing to do that as a condition once the tenants move in.
that's his answer.
What noises in addition to tractor trailers do you foresee being generated from the site?
It's a light industrial site. There is traffic from passenger vehicles and tractor trailers. Again, all activity will be performed inside the building.
My next question has to do with your stormwater management report dated April 26, 2024. In particular, I'm looking at page 57 of the report. I know it's a very big report. Okay, on page 57 of this report, you have listed as a set of plans here. And can you tell me what these plans depict here?
This is Whitestone, so included within our stormwater management report is the Whitestone preliminary geotechnical report. And what the attorney here is holding is the testing location plan.
And the testing location plan here indicates exactly what?
So location of where the tests are in relation to, and I imagine this is what you're getting at, The testing was performed during the due diligence period. And the layout that is presented on this plan is not the layout that is being presented to this board. And nor is that layout going to be used. Obviously, what was submitted to the board is what the applicant is seeking permission on.
Okay, so the plans that are reflected here are inaccurate as to the plans that are depicted in what you're presenting,
I
right?
mean, do you know the date of this
The
figure?
date of this is April 21st, 2023.
Right, so 2 years ago.
And just for the record, can you state what the title is here at the bottom of the page there?
Drawing title, test location plan, client D4 Properties LLC, project proposed warehouse.
Do you know how many trees will be removed as part of this proposed development?
The exact number of trees, no.
And just to clarify, can you reiterate the number of trees and shrubs that are being supplemented as part of your efforts?
I previously testified to 693 trees total, 269 deciduous or shade trees, 424 evergreen trees, 879 shrubs in total, 588 are deciduous standard shrubs, 291 are evergreen shrubs.
And
That is also excluding any revegetation of the farmland meadow areas which are being seeded with a native meadow mix.
And can you tell me what the size of the trees will be at the time of planting?
I'm going to refer to our landscaping plan.
C 13 or C 14?
C13, which has the plant schedule. The trees are proposed, the deciduous shade trees are proposed at, I'm reading this, 2 to 2.5 inches. It could also be 3 and 3.5. I ran out, say 11 by 10.
If it's 2 to 3 inches, how high a planting?
Depends on the deciduous tree type. For example, evergreen trees are planted at 6 to 8 feet when planted. So that's for the evergreen trees. The deciduous can vary. I would have to talk with our landscape architect for the specific heights of each one of those trees, depending on the caliper size. I would say that it's like,
When you come back in April, he's gonna ask you the same question.
I'm sure we will be ready by that point.
And my next question is with regard to lighting. Just to clarify, the lights that are proposed, they'll be turned off between the hours of 11 PM and 6 AM?
With the exception of the lights utilized for security.
Okay, and how will those lights be turned off? Will they be put on a timer? Will there be any light ambient sensors on each fixture?
There's different options, depending on the client or the applicant's preference. You're correct. There are options to set them on a timer. There are options to just use a photo cell to determine when the sun is up or down. Determination hasn't been made yet. It will be one of those options, but again, the applicant is agreeing to the time schedule that is set in municipal code of when the lights not used for security will be on or off.
Any shielding measures that are proposed to ensure that there will be no spillover into adjacent properties?
I've already testified that there will be no spillover onto adjacent properties. These light fixtures are located very far away from the property limits. And then on top of that, certain light fixtures are shielded. They are LED fixtures, so for the board's reference, they're not shielded with the way that you would have a backplate, like old school style. They literally just color slightly the LED fixture to angle the lights in a different direction away from the back. So some of the lights will be shielded, yes.
On sheet C10, in the lighting plan, does it show the light intensity over the entire site?
I believe so, lighting plan, C10, you are correct, yes. So there are foot candle measurements shown around the site.
I have no further questions.
Thank you. It's 10:25. I don't know if you want to start. You know how many questions you have, Mr. Kaplan?
I have a significant amount, but the amount that they're coming back with changes. I can't ask stormwater management questions. I can't ask retaining wall questions.
Yeah. You're going to go 7:30 to 10:30 anyway, so maybe you should just, you guys want to adjourn for the evening? Yeah, so the hearing in this matter is going to be continued without need for further notice for the board's April 10th meeting. Now, we're trying to get this meeting at the middle school. if you check, or the elementary school, or the elementary, we're trying to get the meeting at a school that has a big either auditorium or cafeteria where everyone from the public can fit in there, and that the applicant can have some kind of table to present, and the board can have a table to sit at. If we can do that, we will put on the website that information, let's say, 10 days before the hearing. If we don't have an alternate location, unfortunately, we'll be right back here with the same setup with no more than 80 people in this room and people in the fire company garage. And my advice is come early if you want to get into this room.
Is there a town bulletin board or anything else we could post it maybe along the building? So if anybody shows up here, they know to go down to the other building?
Sure, we can also post it on the front doors of the building, because the building, if it's happening down at the school, the building will be locked.
Right. I just want to make sure that everybody knows where to go in case there's an issue.
It's a good idea.
Thank you.
The third one.
Well, and I only got food, I think, twice, so that's, so far I'm okay, I'm doing okay.
See you all in April.
Thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Don't adjourn.
Okay, well, I just.
We have one other.
Get ready.
I want to.
We're gonna go.
Guys, can you hear me? You guys can hear me. There's another scheduling matter. The township committee has asked the board to review proposed ordinance to add a use, a data center use in the OR zone. It's fact, the RO zone. Thank you. The township committee, if they wanted, extend it here. They don't want to do that. They want to get the board's input first, and they want to have it at a public meeting. So people can hear about it. I thought it would not be smart to schedule it tonight on the agreement, and I'm not too sure if it would be smart. Oh, you have to get it. It would not be smart to schedule it where the original. But there is a Monday. Yeah, there's a fifth Monday. In April. I just want to give you the date. Actually. It's the fifth Monday in March. March 31 is the fifth Monday. The reason I say is because on the fifth, anything of the month, no one wants to. So. Not to replace the time, you know.
Yeah, and then I got.
March 30, just to consider this ordinance, which is actually. This application. March 31, the meeting is second time in March. No, it's not. The township, I want to repeat again. The township committee has not introduced this ordinance. They don't, they like it, they like the concept of it, they don't want to introduce it according to the May. Until they get the board's opinion on whether the board thinks it's a good idea. And they want some kind of public forum for it, which they think the best way to do it is have a public forum in front of the board. So I'm suggesting that be separated apart on this application, and I'm suggesting on March 31, would you be willing to come out and be there to consider that ordinance? Go to the board secretary. So, show of hands, who would be willing to come out March 31? Put your hand down. Okay, you got enough. So we're gonna ask the board secretary. You're gonna ask me for assistance first, you're gonna have to do open public meeting act notice for a special meeting on March 31. That's at the public. And you do the 48 hours in advance. Better, and we will have distributed with all the board members a copy of the proposal from the developer, the letter from the county of New York, asking the board, and a copy of the one-page ordinance. How's that sound? Now, someone want to make a motion to adjourn?
I made it.
We're gonna make it.
I'll make it again.
Secretary, second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.